A brutal awakening to a world of endless slaughter. Plunged into the chaos of the High War, Wom faces a horrifying reality, where there is no glory, only the desperate struggle to survive. Welcome to a living hell. In this world, there is no glory, only the cold, hard reality of endless slaughter. The horror of war isn't just in the fighting, but in the silence that follows. Avon can only stare in shock at the carnage, but for the other soldiers, a motionless body is just a task to be completed. While he hesitates, the order is cold and clear. Just kill him. A brutal lesson in survival. Avon watches in horror as an armored soldier heartlessly executes a fallen comrade, proving that in this war, mercy is a luxury no one can afford. A jarring shift from the blood-soaked battlefield to a quiet apartment. Meet Takakura Raizu, a man trapped in the endless, exhausting cycle of corporate life, long before he ever knew the horrors of the War. A sudden, crushing pain. Kian collapses in the middle of the street, clutching his chest in a desperate struggle for breath. He doesn't want it to end like this, not here, not now. But as the world fades to black, the life of Kian ends abruptly, paving the way for a second life in a strange new world. A new life begins. But there is no peace. Takakura Raizu is reborn as Avon, a soldier in the High Empire, surrounded by the carnage of war. Avon clings to a small, unconscious habit from his past, as he prepares to regroup with Luca and his fellow soldiers. A grim tally of death. Luca tells Avon he should be proud of taking down 9 enemies, but Avon doesn't see it that way. For him, killing isn't a feat to brag about, it's just a job. When the state orders death, he simply carries out his duty above all else. Avon concludes his thought with a chilling fine: a soldier. Exhausted and numb, he prepares to leave the blood-soaked field to rejoin his squad, leaving Luca unsettled by the sheer seriousness of the man beside him. Back at camp, peace is a luxury Avon can't afford. While trying to eat in solitude, he is suddenly ambushed by a boisterous comrade. The scarred soldier excitedly compares their kill counts, bragging that his 15 kills beat Wom's 9. Completely unfazed by the competition, Wom's only observation is that the man reeks of alcohol. Noise doesn't stop! The boisterous soldier continues his bragging, claiming his skill makes him a powerhouse, though he still acknowledges the strength of Commander Dewey. Amidst the chatter, Avon is introduced to the other surviving rookies, the reserve Tian and the spirited Ellen. However, the conversation quickly devolves into a heated debate over whether these special abilities are genuine power or just a total cheat. Curiosity peaks as Cyan asks Commander Ian if his warhammer can truly shatter any armor. With a boastful grin, Ian confirms it, while the group reflects on the nature of skills and the dreamlike quality of magic. These are raw, superhuman physical abilities that turn soldiers into living weapons. Fleeting wish for power. While the others marvel at the strength of skills, Avon stares blankly at the carnage, knowing that in this hell, only someone with such overwhelming strength can truly change the tide of war. Ever the opportunist, Tali teases Avon about how a skill could be a ticket to making money. Avon, remaining characteristically blunt, admits he'd only want one if it were free. But the curiosity doesn't end there, as Ellen pipes up to ask if magic is also on his wish list. One little comment and suddenly it's a crisis. Tali completely misreads Avon's remark about magic, turning it into a dramatic call for an emotional breakthrough, while his comrades shout and shake him, frantically trying to uncover his hidden sorrows. Avon remains utterly exhausted, caring only for a bit of peace and sleep. The laughter dies down as Commander Anne brings the mood back to the brutal reality of war. Tomorrow the fighting intensifies, and a new enemy looms on the horizon. The real nightmare is only just beginning. As the High Empire gathers its forces in Saria City, it becomes clear that the war against the Liberato Trade Federation was merely a prelude. With a sinister smile, Commander N reveals their true, far more ambitious target, the Mirrored Kingdom. The target is set marred. But this won't be like the skirmishes they've known. It's going to be a clash of unprecedented scale. Prepare yourselves, for this battle will be unlike anything you've ever experienced. The horror of war is never far away. As the threat of a larger conflict looms, images of blood-soaked battlefields and the screams of the dying flood Wom's mind. He recalls the desperate pleas for mercy from those Hes-faced men with families just like anyone else. But in this hell, empathy is a luxury he cannot afford. To survive, he must embrace a cold, hard truth: he is a soldier, and staying alive is the only thing that matters. A sudden jolt back to reality. Avon's haunting reflections are cut short as he narrowly avoids a strike, only to be mocked by Adden. With a smirk, Aiden counts this as the 10th time the rookie has drifted off, reminding him that in this world a wandering mind is a dangerous liability. Back to reality. As the squad marches forward, Avon is jolted out of his thoughts just as they reach the gates of Saria City. A brief respite before the storm. As the squad settles into Saria City to wait for tomorrow's campaign, Aven finds himself navigating a gauntlet of desperation. Surrounded by beggars and prostitutes clawing for attention, the grim reality of the city's slum mirrors the bleakness of the war they are about to enter, a moment of desperate hope. A woman in the slums tries to entice Avon for the night, but he doesn't even blink. With a cold, empty refusal, he leaves her behind in the dirt, further highlighting the crushing hopelessness of the city, a flicker of mercy in a cold world. Despite his harsh rejection, Avon hands the woman some money, telling her to get something to eat. Stunned and grateful, she walks away with a quiet thank you. A small act of kindness can be a dangerous signal in a place this cruel. Ian warns Avon not to let his good nature get the best of him, reminding him that in the depths of Saria City, generosity only invites more desperate souls to swarm around him. A bloodthirsty machine in war, yet soft at heart. Ian's observation lingers as Avon looks upon the city's misery, the sight of poverty pulling him back to the humble home where his life in this world began. A glimpse into a painful past. Avon remembers the crushing weight of poverty, where farming alone wants enough to survive. To save his home and support his family, he made the only choice he had to become a soldier. A haunting sight. Looking at the broken souls in the slums, Avon can't help but fear that his own family might one day end up just as desperate. He reflects on the tragedy of the region, noting that Saria, once part of the Konoha kingdom, wasn't always this wasteland. It was once a land of abundance, a glimpse into a lost paradise. Ian recounts the state of the land 5 years ago, when the Konoha kingdom was a prosperous territory of vast fields and abundance. He recalls the border tensions with the Hyserk Empire and the irony of cattle eating food that Avon once relied on. Looking at the current ruins, Avon can't help but wonder how such a paradise fell into such misery. A kingdom's fall begins with a single betrayal. Ian reveals the grim history of the region, explaining how the Mirrored Grand Duke, a former Konohan nobleman, defected to the Farius kingdom to orchestrate a brutal invasion. Through a scorched earth campaign, the land was vandalized and ruined, allowing the Duke to seize power and establish his own independent country. With Hyserk lacking the troops to intervene at the time, the region was left to rot, leaving Avon to finally understand why the land is now a desolate wasteland, a grudge born from betrayal. Ian explains that the hatred the Konohan citizens feel toward Mirrored and Farius is far deeper than any resentment they hold for Hyserk. Disgusted by the dirty nature of these politics, Avon quietly resolves that these are the kind of enemies he must defeat next time. A moment of respite. Ian treats the squad to drinks as they arrive at a local tavern, raising their glasses in a spirited toast for victory against Mirrored. Amidst the camaraderie, Avon finds a brief peace in the simple comfort of a warm meal, a rare moment of warmth in a cold world. Avon finds himself appreciating a simple bowl of bean soup, reflecting on how his perspective has shifted. As the squad relaxes and enjoys the meal, the atmosphere is light until they realize their commander, Ian, has had a bit too much to drink. The celebration takes a sudden turn as Avon is overcome by nausea. Unable to hold it back, he begins to vomit, while Ian calmly tells him that he can handle his report later. As Avon struggles, Ian watches him with a strange knowing smirk, seemingly intrigued by the young soldier's reaction. A miserable end to a meal. Avon finds himself retching in a dark alley, while Ian watches with a smirk, noting how hypocritical it is for a soldier to be this fragile. A bitter retort. As Avon continues to retch in the dirt, he lashes out at Ian's definition of a soldier, calling him a murderer instead. A new day begins. In the heart of the fortress, the troops assemble as a powerful figure steps forward. Ivan, the commander of the Mirrored District Army. A call to blood fuels the soldiers' fervor, calling them the symbol of the Empire's bravery. He demands they trample their enemies to end the 5-year war, culminating in a single brutal command. Kill them all! The call for blood rings in his ears. Killing again. No, it's simply kill or be killed. That's the only rule for a soldier, isn't it? As he spirals into his own dread, a comrade notices his ghostly pale face, but Avon quickly masks his psychological turmoil with a lie, claiming it's nothing more than a hangover. From personal struggles to the cold calculations of war. While Avon finds a moment of quiet support from a comrade, the bigger picture is far more grim. The Hyserk Empire's army has split into 3 divisions to seize the Mirrored territory, and Duai's squad has been placed right in the line of fire, tasked with capturing a massive fort guarded by 3,000 soldiers. Behold the target. Saria's paramount fort, a massive wall of stone that stands as the final obstacle in this campaign. While the sheer scale of the fortress leaves some soldiers shaken, Ian remains composed, stepping forward to lead his squad into the heart of the danger. A brief moment of levity and tension as the squad prepares for the assault. Ian warns the newcomers about the brutality of a castle siege, but offers a chilling reassurance: if the enemy attacks, Avon will handle it to Ian. Avon has become a professional killer, capable of slaughtering dozens with a completely blank expression. Don't make me sound like a battle maniac. Ian protests, though he admits he doesn't want to see the newcomers perish. Cyan recalls Walm's impressive record of defeating 9 enemies in the war against Liberatoa, trusting in his strength to keep them safe. As the horn blares, the time for talk is over. The assault begins. The moment of truth has arrived. As the signal echoes, the soldiers realize the enemy is finally within sight. While some are swept up in the bloodlust and excitement of the charge, Avon remains focused, his expression grim as he prepares to dive back into the slaughter. The daunting scale of the fortress becomes clear. A monolithic barrier, standing between the soldiers and their objective. With Avon and Duai's squad positioned for the assault, the men can only gulp in nervous anticipation, bracing themselves for the slaughter. The nightmare begins. No sooner do the soldiers reach the gates than a brutal strike rips through their ranks, sending men flying like ragdolls in a sudden, violent eruption of chaos. Pure chaos erupts as the enemy unleashes a terrifying skill called hard shoot, raining death upon the front lines. Amidst the screams and the hail of projectiles, Avon barely keeps his footing while Cyan is warned that a single step back could mean certain death. There's no time for hesitation. They must reach the wall or be slaughtered where they stand. A brutal welcome to the front lines. The terrifying hard shoot is revealed to be magic water bullets, shredding through the soldiers with ease. While Cyan is paralyzed by the horror of the magic, Avon only manages a grim, ironic comment about their nice reception. Pure chaos erupts on the battlefield. As the devastating magic bullets shred through the front lines, the soldiers can only stare in disbelief. A magician, they scream, realizing the terrifying nature of the enemy's power, while commanders desperately try to rally their broken troops in the heat of the slaughter. The chaos doesn't stop, but the orders are clear. While the guards gather at the gate, Avon and Cyan realize the walls haven't been fully surrounded yet. But there is no time for hesitation. The command from Battalion Commander Liguria is absolute. Break through the walls and launch an all-out attack. The assault begins in earnest. With a desperate roar, the High-Cirque soldiers throw themselves against the walls, clinging to ladders as they climb into a rain of steel. Amidst the screams of the falling and the shouts of the defenders, Avon pushes forward, shielding Cyan as they fight their way up into the chaos. The climb is a death trap. As the soldiers struggle up the ladders, a sudden violent strike tears through the ranks, obliterating a comrade's head in a spray of blood. Avon can only watch in shock, while amidst the screams, a desperate soldier shouts his thanks to Neri. All the while, the enemy looks on with a cold, mocking smile. The breach is here. As the High-Cirque soldiers finally scale the walls, the defenders are caught in a wave of shock and blood. Avon can only watch in horror as the battle turns into a mindless slaughter right before his eyes. The breach is complete, and the slaughter begins. Avon tears through the defenders with cold, lethal precision, turning the top of the wall into a bloodbath. As he carves a path of destruction, his own comrades can only watch in awe at his terrifying combat prowess. A sudden realization strikes. In the heat of the bloodbath, Avon's mind flashes to Noor, momentarily pausing his rampage. Before him, a broken soldier can only gasp in sheer terror, waiting for the final blow. The moment of hesitation is shattered. A heavily armored knight bursts onto the scene with a deafening clang, sending a wave of pure terror through the ranks. A clash of wills. The armored knight declares his resolve to protect the principality from the barbarian soldiers of the Empire, but Oven isn't shaken mocks the knight's strength, dismissing him as a nobody who only knows how to bully recruits. No more words. With a sudden explosive burst of speed, the knight lunges forward, his heavy weapon swinging toward Avon in a blur of steel. A brutal clash of steel. Avon takes a heavy blow but immediately strikes back, only to realize the knight's armor is a massive obstacle. Unable to slice through the thick plating, Avon knows he must find a way to end the fight quickly. Time is running out. Realizing that any delay could cost Noor her life, Avon grits his teeth in frustration. He can't let this stalemate continue, has to take that armored bastard down right here, right now. No more wasting time. With a chilling, determined gaze, Avon stares down the armored knight, deciding to end this nuisance immediately. "You're the worst," he mutters, ready to unleash a more lethal assault. A sudden lethal shift in momentum. The knight's arrogance vanishes in an instant as Avon's blade finds its mark, slicing through the supposedly impenetrable plating. Stunned and bleeding, the knight can only wonder how a small fry managed to break through his defenses. The tables have turned. Stunned and bleeding, the knight can't wrap his head around what just happened. Avon's speed and power have evolved, leaving the armored warrior completely defenseless. A magical barrier? The knight finally realizes the source of the overwhelming force, feeling his own body and sword grow strangely light as he is blown away. Despite the shock, he refuses to submit, screaming his defiance in a desperate attempt to regain control. A crushing blow. The armored knight is sent flying, his pride and defenses shattered in a single, devastating instant. A crushing defeat and a chilling sight. As the armored knight lies broken on the ground, he can only wonder in disbelief. Why is this boy laughing at him? a crushing defeat. As the armored knight struggles to grasp how a mere soldier could possess such terrifying power, the surrounding army is thrown into a panic. But Avon isn't finished. His sheer force erupts, blowing away everything in his path. The carnage doesn't stop. While the soldiers push forward with ruthless orders to kill everyone in the path, Avon finds a moment of quiet amidst the chaos to check on a wounded Cian. Even in the peak of a brutal battle, these small bonds of camaraderie are all they have left. Time to clear the way. With a surge of adrenaline, Avon unleashes his power move, violently smashing through the enemy lines as he gives in to the thrill of the fight, a display of raw power. Commander Ein acknowledges Wom's growth, noting that he has finally found his skill. Recognizing the toll of the battle, Ein tells him to step back and get some rest, leaving the cleanup to the rest of the squad. As Avon agrees to step down, his thoughts immediately return to Cian, a brief moment of respite amidst the carnage. Cian expresses her gratitude to Avon, relieved that her bleeding has stopped and she can return to the front lines. Avon gives a tired smile, but as he looks away, the weight of the battle hits him. He can't believe he actually made it out alive. The silence of the aftermath. The besieged fort has finally surrendered, bringing a close to a day of relentless slaughter from dawn until sunset. Avon sits alone, broken and drained, but there is no true peace to be found. This was merely a skirmish at the border, and for him the real hell has only just begun. The horror doesn't end with surrender. As Avon and his comrades survey the carnage, they realize the danger is far from over. There are still magic users lurking among the enemy. The sheer brutality of the conflict is laid bare as they stumble upon a fallen soldier, his face completely crushed by a devastating, unseen force. The war never truly pauses. A few days after the siege, the High-Cirque army's advance toward the mired capital is halted by ruthless guerrilla warfare in the surrounding forests. As Avon and his comrades survey another hit caravan, they find more mutilated corpses, leaving them desperate to find the hidden enemy. A gruesome discovery leads to a terrifying realization. As the soldiers examine the mangled remains, they rule out standard weapons, realizing that only a shield could cause such massive, crushing damage. Commander Ein concludes that the attacker must possess the Iron Wall skill, a power that turns a simple shield into a lethal instrument of death. The situation is far worse than it seems. With both magic and skill users leading the guerrilla attacks, the mired forces are proving unexpectedly resilient. Despite sending an entire company to hunt them down, the High-Cirque army is the one bleeding out, losing dozens of men to an invisible, lethal enemy. A brief moment of grim levity. While on high alert, the soldiers joke about their own filth and the smell of tobacco, trying to mask the oppressive fear of the unseen enemy lurking in the woods. A brutal reminder of betrayal. The soldiers come across the hanging corpses of the forest people who sold them out to the mired army. While Cian is left speechless and shaken by the horror, Avon remains cold, recalling the harsh truth. It was because of people like these that dozens of their friends were slaughtered. The gap between the ordinary and the extraordinary is a terrifying thing. While Cian still grapples with the horror of war, the other soldiers discuss that's the nightmare of facing skill and magic users. To them, such a fight would be like facing Commander Dewey and Avon's simultaneously suicide mission. With a faint, knowing smile, Avon asks if he is no longer considered a normal human, a fact his comrades all too readily confirm. The peace is shattered in an instant. A sudden blast echoes through the woods, leaving the soldiers startled. But Avon remains eerily composed. The search network has triggered. An enemy is lurking just 300 to 400 meters ahead. The trap is set. With the enemy pinpointed, the squad moves with lethal precision, coordinating their positions to ensure there is no escape. As the order to charge rings out, Wom's gaze turns cold, his mind already shifting into the ruthless efficiency of a soldier ready to kill. The trap is sprung, but the victory is short-lived. Just as they move to secure the kill, the squad realizes they've walked into a larger force. But for Avon, the surprise doesn't slow him down. He plunges straight into the fray, cutting through the enemy with cold, brutal precision. A whirlwind of steel and blood. Avon doesn't hesitate, cutting through the mired reinforcements with terrifying precision. The enemy soldiers are left in a state of pure shock, unable to react before their lives are snuffed out by his cold, mechanical efficiency. The tide of battle shifts once more. Suddenly, the leading adventurers burst onto the scene, but despite their elite status, they arrive to find themselves surrounded by enemy reinforcements, plunging the battlefield into further chaos. Who exactly are these adventurers? As the leader explains their role in hunting demons and clearing dungeons, Avon realizes the grim truth. If the adventurers handled the guerrilla forces, then only the elite knights are left to face. But the battle doesn't wait for analysis. A sudden clash erupts, and a formidable iron wall skill is unleashed, stopping an attack dead in its tracks. The rules of the guild mean nothing in the face of total war. While the hypocrisy of neutral adventurers is questioned, a devastating blow crashes through the battlefield, turning the clash into a brutal struggle for survival. Magic enters the fray. A sudden wind blade tears through the battlefield, leaving an enemy soldier reeling in shock. Amidst the chaos, Avon stands cold and unwavering, his eyes locked on the threat, a surprising face behind the deadly magic. Avon is momentarily stunned to find that one of the adventurers is nothing more than a kid. But in this brutal war, age is irrelevant, magic users are a lethal nuisance, and he knows he cannot afford to let his guard down. Bring it on. The elite knights charge with blind confidence, but Avon meets their aggression with a single, lethal strike. One down, and he's already looking for the next. With cold, surgical precision, Avon tears through the elite armored knights, turning their supposed superiority into a bloodbath. Mercy is a luxury the battlefield doesn't afford. Avon continues his lethal dance, slicing through the elite knights with cold precision. As one soldier desperately begs for help, Avon looks on with empty eyes, delivering a chilling truth. There is no one coming to save them. Cold, calculated, and utterly heartless. Avon stands silently amidst the carnage, leaving the survivors to tremble in shock. They can only ask why, as they face the terrifying reality of a man who has completely discarded his humanity. Pure horror. Can't wrap her head around Avon's cold-blooded efficiency, screaming in disbelief at how easily he takes lives. But for Avon, there is no room for sentimentally the grim reality that on a battlefield, such brutality is simply necessary. A cold reality check. Avon dismisses his moral outrage, reminding her that she's likely no stranger to killing herself. Before she can even process his words, he cuts the conversation short with a sudden, violent burst of speed that leaves her paralyzed in fear. No more talking. With a cold, calculated strike using the same magic and trajectory as before, Avon closes in for the kill, time to die. Rag can only gasp in terror, completely overwhelmed by his ruthless efficiency. No defense is absolute. With a single overwhelming strike, Avon shatters Ree's shield, proving that his terrifying skill is far beyond her reach. A momentary clash, a crushing defeat. While Avon acknowledges Rhea's training and quick reflexes, he sees right through her to him. Her hesitation is obvious, simply isn't used to killing people. The gap between them is absolute. With a cold, indifferent gaze, Avon delivers a final, crushing demand. Submit already. A cold reminder of reality. As Avon keeps Rhea pinned and powerless, he delivers a crushing blow note just with his blade. But with the truth, he forces her to confront the blood on her own hands, stripping away her moral high ground. A moment of absolute terror. With Rhea pinned beneath him and a blade pressed against her, she can only stare up in shock, wondering if she is already dead. Avon looks down at her, his voice a cold whisper in the silence of the forest. A moment of absolute terror. Rhea can only stare in shock as Avon looms over her, his cold gaze and a sharp making it clear that her struggle is utterly futile. A sudden intervention breaks the tension. As another adventurer screams for their leader to stay back, Avon looks on with a chilling, knowing gaze. He finally realizes the truth. The girl trembling beneath him is the one leading this group of adventurers. The fight is far from over. With a sigh of pure irritation, Avon admits how much he hates this tedious cycle of combat. But as the next adventurer lunges forward, his cold instincts kick back in, ready to end this quickly. The battle is far from over. Avon is immediately intercepted by another adventurer, who utilizes body acceleration to strike with blinding speed. Despite the sudden surge of power, Avon remains composed, quickly realizing he's dealing with a wind magic user. Steel clashes in a blur of speed as Avon meets the adventurer's assault head-on. Driven by fury, the blonde warrior screams for him to shut up. But Avon only responds with a chilling, confident smile. Are you sure you want me as your opponent? Speed means nothing to a man who has seen it all. The blonde adventurer lunges forward with a desperate, high-speed strike, but Avon doesn't even blink. With cold precision, he shuts down the attack, mocking the very technique the adventurer relied on. Panic sets in. Realizing Avon has completely read his movements, the blonde adventurer screams in desperation for Rhea to evade. But for Rhea, the danger arrives before she can even react. Pure, unadulterated terror. The blonde adventurer can only scream in agony and desperation as Avon ignores her completely to her. He is nothing more than a heartless monstera crazy invader who tramples over the blood and tears of others without a second thought. A cold truth hits harder than any blade. Avon looks down on the blonde adventurer, questioning why those who deal so much death are so terrified to face it themselves. Broken and desperate, she can only scream in denial, her world collapsing around her. The time for talking is over. With a cold, decisive strike, Avon silences the blonde adventurer's screams. As the blow lands, her arrogance vanishes, replaced by the raw, paralyzing terror of someone who finally understands the weight of her own mortality. The screams of agony fade into a hollow silence. As the blonde adventurer realizes that everyone, including Elle, is dead, Avon looks down at her with chilling indifference. He mocks her lack of experience with killing, admitting with a dark twist that he's almost jealous of her innocence. A cold silence falls over the ruins. Without another word, Avon turns his back on the broken girl and walks away, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her own despair. What this she can only whisper, completely shattered by the monster who just erased everything she knew. A sudden, brutal strike. An armored soldier is left in absolute shock, unable to comprehend the magic that just maimed him. As he frantically searches for the culprit, Avon emerges with a cold, blood-stained smile. "It's you," he whispers, the predator finally revealing himself. Pure, unadulterated terror. As Avon's attack erupts in a devastating blast, the armored soldier stares in horror, realizing that this is no mere trick, it's a death sentence. Pure chaos erupts as the explosion tears through the ranks. Realizing the horror of a ranged AoE attack, the armored soldier screams in desperation for his men to scatter. But for many, it's already too late. The smoke clears, but the confusion remains. Avon stands calmly amidst the devastation he created, noting that the blonde adventurer has fled. Meanwhile, the surviving soldiers are left in a state of disbelief, mistakenly believing that she was the one who unleashed the massive skill to secure her escape. The carnage ends, but the chill remains. With the main remnants of the Miard army eliminated, Avon sees no reason to waste more effort and orders the advance toward the capital. However, the soldiers are left haunted by the encounter, realizing that against such terrifying skill, they were only a moment away from a gruesome end. A cold silence descends as Avon walks away, his murky eyes reflecting a soul long since eroded by war. "Don't kill because I want." He is indifferent to the wreckage he left behind. Behind him, the blonde adventurer collapses in a fit of sobbing and terror, staring at his retreating figure. To her, he is no longer human, is a monster. A life reborn into a nightmare. Once a salaryman named Yorizo Takakura, he is now Walma soldier for the Hyserk Empire, forced to kill just to survive. Caught in the bloody conflict between the Empire, the Miard Principality, Avon has learned the hard way that this world is undeniably cruel and ruthless. A new turning point arrives. As the story shifts to the decisive Battle of Eidenberg, a mysterious man appears before Avon. With a simple command to grab my hand, he offers a path that leaves Avon utterly bewildered. A surprising offer in a moment of peace. Avon is initially confused when Neri asks him to hold hands, but the reason is soon revealed. Recalling Avon's interest in magic, Neri decides that their current break is the perfect time for a lesson. For once, a glimmer of genuine curiosity shines in Avon's eyes as he eagerly agrees to learn. A spark of power begins to flow. Neri takes Avon's hand, transferring his own magical energy to teach him the basics of magic. While their comrades watch with curiosity, wondering if Avon can eventually cast fireballs or water spears, Avon is more focused on the sensation, noting that holding hands feels pretty hot, a first step toward the arcane. As Neri guides him to concentrate, Avon feels a strange, cold sensation surging through him. This chilling feeling is the essential prerequisite for wielding elemental magic, and Neri warns him to keep his consciousness intact as the energy flows. A spark of wonder in a world of war. Neri tells Avon to let go and focus on the palms of his hands, urging him to visualize the flow of a river or the vastness of an ocean. Avon closes his eyes, thinking of rain and water, until suddenly a sphere of liquid forms right in his grasp. Overwhelmed with excitement, Avon looks at Neri, thrilled to have finally experienced the touch of magic. A small victory leads to a big headache, while Avon is thrilled with his first bit of magic. Isn't impressed by the quantity. Instead of praise, Avon is rewarded with a new title, the squad's second human well. As the other soldiers cheer at the thought of endless water for drinking and washing, Avon quickly realizes his new power might just be a curse, a harsh lesson in efficiency. Milo warns Avon to conserve his energy, explaining that while water magic is relatively cheap, overdoing it could leave him completely withered. But the real shock comes when Milo reveals that Walm's own combat skills have been fueled by magic all along, leaving the young soldier stunned by the revelation. The line between magic and skill is thinner than Avon ever imagined. After Milo explains the mechanics of power, Avon reveals a sobering truth about his past. He is illiterate, a product of a harsh upbringing on a military farm. But there is no time for reflection. Milo is already moving on to the next test. Fire. A little bit of mischief before the real test. Avon decides to put his new human well abilities to use by splashing Milo with water. But the laughter is short-lived as the cold hits. Milo's expression shifts instantly, his gaze sharpening as the joke comes to an abrupt end. Talk about a trial by fire. Avon's first attempt at fire magic goes from 0 to 100 real quick, triggering a massive explosion that leaves him scorched and the rest of the camp in a total panic. While the other soldiers freak out over the sudden inferno, Milo can only watch in stunned silence at the sheer scale of the disaster. Talk about a disaster. Walm's attempt at fire magic ends in a literal blaze, leaving Milo screaming in agony over his scorched hair. While Adentu frantically begs for forgiveness on his behalf, a terrified Avon realizes he's in deep trouble as a furious Milo prepares to deliver some immediate consequences. Talk about a trial by fire. Avon's attempt at magic ends in a total disaster, blasting his comrades across the camp. As the dust settles, he can only stare in speechless horror at the chaos has unleashed. The dust settles on the disaster. Milo pulls a trembling Avon to his feet, calmly noting that the massive blast proves he indeed has an aptitude for fire magic. But for Avon, the relief is short-lived, because Milo is already ready to continue. A sudden interruption. A messenger arrives from the Allied troops, bearing an urgent order from Captain Ligurian specifically for Commander Ian. Intrigued and alert, Ian is eager to find out exactly what this message entails. The orders are nothing short of madness. Stunned by the strategy, Commander is informed that the Ian squad must hastily merge with the main battalion. As the drums of war begin to beat, the stage is set for a slaughter. At the plains of Raref, the enemy strategists look over the battlefield with cold precision, analyzing the Hycerc army's positions. With the strongholds of Myard and Farius in place, they believe the Empire's movements are predictable and that their defeat is inevitable. Confidence bordering on arrogance dines the Hycerc strategy laughable, mocking their attempt to restrain an army of 6,000 men. With a cold gaze, he prepares to turn the Hycerc troops into nothing more than skeletons. A cold calculation before the slaughter. Jin surveys the Hycerc's positioning, admitting their strategy is sharp, but his arrogance remains unshaken. To him, they are merely obstacles to be crushed, and he prepares to unleash Jeff's cavalry battalion to tear through Myard. The time for planning is over. With a thunderous command, Jin urges his soldiers to emerge victorious for their king, declaring that everything belongs to the Farius. As he looks out over the plains, he notices the Hycerc troops on the Moveleaf bloody beginning of the end for both Myard and the Empire. The drums of war have finally sounded. While the main forces clash, a group of elite soldiers watches from the periphery, their curiosity quickly turning into cynicism. As they observe the ferocity of the Myard troops defending their homeland, a chilling realization sinks in: they aren't here to secure victory, but are likely being set aside to be discarded. A cold calculation of war. One of the elite soldiers briefly explains the deployment plan. While the Hycerc army targets the Myard stronghold, the Ligurian battalion, including the Due squad, will converge and launch a blitz alongside Jeff's cavalry. A reckless gamble. The elite soldiers are horrified to learn that the infantry and cavalry will be charging together, calling the move completely insane. When they question why they've been chosen for such a perilous task, the answer is cold: their experience in the Ligurian battalion. For these men, their expertise is nothing more than a reason to be thrown into the meat grinder, a living nightmare on the battlefield. The elite soldiers are horrified by the reality of the combined charge. To run alongside horses means there is no room for error. If their lungs fail or their legs give out, they won't be killed by the enemy, but crushed by their own comrades. In this reckless maneuver, the only way to survive is to keep killing while sprinting for their lives. A brief, tense exchange before the storm. Wam's comrades tease him about his tendency to go on a rampage, acknowledging that between him, Commander Dewey, and Willard's magic, their squad is a concentrated force of chaos. A chilling realization hits Avon. As he envisions the chaotic slaughter of the battlefield, a single desperate question haunts him. Can they truly run alongside the cavalry and survive until the end? The silence is deafening. The attack orders are overdue, and a seed of doubt begins to grow among the elite soldiers. Has the vanguard already fallen? While they fear the plan is unraveling, they desperately hope that Commander Berger hasn't misread the tide of battle. Chaos erupts as the main army of Farius strikes. Panic spreads among the elite soldiers, who are still waiting for orders that never come. To make matters worse, the reserve army of Myard is now closing in on their position. Trapped and leaderless, they face a terrifying reality. If they don't act now, they will be completely decimated. A sudden command cuts through the chaos. But instead of the expected strategy, the order is a complete curveball. Attack the Farius stronghold. The soldiers are left reeling in confusion. This wasn't the plan at all. No more time for questions. With the cavalry already thundering forward, the elite soldiers are thrust into a desperate sprint, forced to run for their lives and their mission. No more time for confusion. With a cold, focused gaze, Avon and the elite soldiers throw themselves into the fray. Run to your death. A world where mercy is a luxury and survival is a miracle. Reborn as Avon after a miserable life in Japan, a former salaryman now finds himself a disposable cog in the Hycerc Empire's war machine. Alongside the Due squad of charging on foot beside cavalry where a single hesitation means being crushed by his own assassins. In this undeniably cruel and ruthless land, Wam's only goal is to endure the unending bloodshed, breathless and pushed to the brink. Amidst the sounds of crashing steel and splattering blood, Avon charges forward, his eyes reflecting the sheer desperation of a man fighting just to survive another second. A clash of titans begins. With 15,000 Hycerc soldiers charging against 25,000 allied forces, There is no room for hesitation. To stop is to die. As they finally make contact with the enemy infantry, Avon is pushed to his absolute breaking point, cursing the sheer agony of trying to keep pace with the thundering cavalry. No room for hesitation in the heart of the slaughter. Avon swings his weapon with lethal precision, cleaving through an enemy soldier in a spray of blood. With a frustrated click of his tongue, he quickly recovers and pushes forward, fighting to survive the relentless tide of war. A calculated gamble. Avon is stunned to learn that their chaotic charge was actually a bluff, designed to lure the enemy forces away and leave the Farius headquarters vulnerable. The trap has been sprung. Now, the true objective looms ahead. The Farius headquarters. With the main army serving as desperate decoys, Avon and his unit have only a fleeting moment to strike. To secure victory, they must crush the enemy's command center before the window of opportunity slams shut. The assault begins. As the enemy screams in alarm, Avon and his comrades crash into the Farius headquarters. Amidst the chaos and blood, Avon didn't hesitate, unleashing a searing fireball to incinerate everything in his way. A blast of pure destruction. Avon unleashes a powerful fireball that rips through the enemy ranks, scattering the defenders in a violent explosion. With the enemy line shattered and a gap finally opened, Avon lets out a triumphant shout. The breach is successful. The line has broken. As panic ripples through the enemy ranks, the Farius soldiers desperately try to stop the onslaught, but it's too late. Avon and the High-Circ forces tear through the gap, cutting down anyone in their path as they storm toward the headquarters. Desperation takes hold as the Farius soldiers scramble to clear the way. With the High-Circ forces closing in, they fight a frantic battle against their own defenses, tearing down anti-cavalry fences in a last-ditch effort to bring in their cavalry before everything collapses. The barrier is gone. With a thunderous roar, the Farius cavalry finally surges forward. Leading the charge, the first of Jeff's battalion screams for the infantry to clear the path or be crushed beneath their hooves. The tide turns in an instant. With a thunderous charge, the Farius cavalry slams into the High-Circ lines, shredding through the infantry in a brutal, bloody onslaught. The carnage is absolute. As Avon gasps for air, fighting through sheer exhaustion and a parched throat, he is reminded of a terrifying truth. The militia they've fought so far were just the beginning. Now, the real nightmare begins as the main troops of Farius descend upon them. The nightmare only gets worse. Just as the warning echoes, the Farius elite cavalry descends like a tidal wave of steel. Avon is thrown into a frantic life-or-death scramble, barely dodging the lethal strikes of the armored knights in a chaotic storm of horseflesh and blades. A new level of terror arrives. Amidst the slaughter, Avon realizes the enemy's armor and weaponry are far beyond anything he has encountered before. This is no ordinary soldier, it is a royal guard. The onslaught is merciless. While the royal guard screams for the lines to move or die, Avon realizes the terrifying truth. If these elites are on the field, the Farius general must be close by. A sudden crushing blow. The royal guard is stunned by the sheer power of Avon's strike, barely managing to hold his ground. But as the chaos erupts, Avon slips through their defenses, leaving the elite soldiers baffled and enraged. The slaughter is relentless, and the enemy seems endless. Amidst the blood and chaos, Ian spots a strange group attempting to slip away. And more importantly, he identifies their general. He desperately calls for the Iron Squad to back him up. But his comrades are far too occupied fighting for their lives to answer the call. The clock is ticking. Ian realizes with horror that the enemy soldiers are nothing more than a meat shield to buy time for their general's escape. Meanwhile, Avon continues his relentless onslaught, cutting through the ranks with terrifying efficiency. A clash of sheer force. The Royal Guard unleashes a devastating power move, certain of victory. But to his horror, Avon doesn't budge, leaving the elite soldier stunned as he realizes his strongest strike is simply not enough. One strike was all it took. With a single devastating blow, Avon crushes the elite Royal Guard, leaving the once proud soldier broken and gasping for air in the dirt. No more playing around. Avon recognizes that the fearless Royal Guards are a wall between him and the enemy headquarters. And if the general escapes, the mission is a failure. Deciding that a simple fireball won't suffice, he prepares to unleash a hellish inferno, vowing to burn everything in his path to the ground. Hell breaks loose as Avon unleashes his devastating magic. Terrified by the sudden inferno, the enemy soldiers panic, yet some launch a desperate suicidal charge in a last attempt to stop him. Even as the flames crackle, the Royal Guards struggle to maintain their line against the overwhelming heat. A living inferno. Avon stands at the heart of a blazing hellscape, his power turning the battlefield into a furnace. While his comrades scramble to avoid being caught in the crossfire, a desperate enemy soldier makes a final suicidal charge, screaming his defiance. But there is no turning back now. His allies are calling for the kill, and Avon is ready to burn everything in his path. A desperate gamble. Amidst the roaring flames, one enemy soldier launches a suicidal charge, catching Avon completely off guard. A desperate gamble ends in agony. The soldier's final strike is instantly incinerated, leaving him to scream in terror as he realizes the true horror of Avon's blue fire. Panic erupts in the enemy headquarters as advisors plead with Jin to retreat for his own safety. But Winston, fueled by pride and stubbornness, refuses to abandon his stronghold until a frantic report reveals that their anti-cavalry fence has finally been broken through. The walls are falling. As the chaos of the breach reaches his doorstep, Lord Farius Winston is forced to face the devastating reality of his crumbling defenses. A chilling realization strikes on the battlefield. To see the blue fire is to see the bonfire to the netherworld, a sign that death is waiting for you, a name for the herald of death. Ignis Fatuus, the foolish fire that leads the fallen to their end. The battlefield has transformed into a literal gateway to hell. Amidst the carnage, Avon's cold, murky eyes lock onto the enemy leader. "Commanding General," he whispers, declaring that the next strike is reserved just for Jin. The hunter becomes the hunted. Having stormed the enemy headquarters with the cavalry at his side, Avon has finally cornered Commander Jin. With the awakening of the terrifying Ignis Fatuus, the enemy commander is left trembling in the face of absolute destruction. The blue flames have cleared, leaving behind a wasteland of despair. With a cold and unwavering presence, Avon locks his gaze on the enemy commander. The next strike is reserved for one man alone, a proud commander brought low. Avon stares down the terrified man, coldly mocking him as if he were nothing more than a common foot soldier. In a desperate attempt to reclaim his dignity, Winston Farius screams his full title and name. But his prestige is useless against the cold reality of his defeat. A cold calculation in the heat of battle. After a moment of doubt, Avon confirms that the man before him is indeed the real Winston Farius. Rather than ending the commander's life on the spot, Avon demands his surrender, recognizing that capturing a royal prisoner of war would be far more beneficial to the Hycerc Empire than a simple kill. Pride is a dangerous thing to cling to in the face of annihilation. Refusing to surrender, Jin asserts that as long as he has his sword and his soldiers are still fighting, he has no reason to yield. Pride is a luxury the dying cannot afford. Jin screams his refusal to surrender, but Avon only looks back with a cold, murderous intensity. Pride is a luxury the dying cannot afford. Avon doesn't waste words on Jin's stubbornness. Instead, he strikes with blinding speed. A single devastating blow sends the commander flying, leaving Jin shaken by the realization that he was just a fraction of a second away from a fatal wound. A mere figurehead? Avon quickly realizes he was wrong. Despite his royal status, Jin is surprisingly strong. Now exhausted and drained of the mana needed for his blue flames, Avon faces a grim reality. He can't rely on magic to finish this. So, how does he kill a man who refuses to fall? No magic, no skills, just raw killing instinct. With his mana depleted, Avon stops relying on supernatural abilities and turns to the only thing he has left, his honed combat instincts. He launches a speed blindly fast strikes, pushing his physical limits to find a lethal opening in Jin's defense. A desperate struggle for survival. Avon pushes his physical limits in a high-speed clash, but Jin's mastery is absolute. No matter how he strikes, Avon can't find a single opening to deliver a killing blow. A flash of steel and a spray of blood. With a cold, murderous intensity in his eyes, Avon cuts through everything in his path, refusing to let up in his desperate struggle to find a gap in Jin's impenetrable defense. A desperate gamble. Unable to break through Jin's impenetrable defense, Avon throws his weapon with everything he has. Caught off guard by the sudden attack, Jin is momentarily stunned for Avon. This is the only chance he needs. A desperate gamble pays off. With Jin momentarily stunned by the unexpected projectile, Avon lunges forward, closing the gap in a final lethal rush. A gamble that pays off in blood. With Jin momentarily off balance, Avon lunges forward and delivers a devastating strike, carving right through the commander's defenses. A brutal victory. Avon stands over the broken body of Commander Jin, both men exhausted and drenched in blood. Even in defeat, Jin's spirit remains unbroken, as he declares that his kingdom has not yet fallen, leaving Avon to stare back in grim, weary silence. The news spreads like wildfire. A messenger screams at the top of his lungs, announcing to the entire army that the commander of Farius has finally been defeated. The tide has turned. As the Farius soldiers are hunted down in a desperate retreat, the crushing reality sets in for those left behind. A devastated soldier finds the fallen Lord Farius Winston, unable to believe that their commander has truly been defeated. The massacre is absolute. With their leader fallen, the Farius soldiers are hunted like animals, their lives extinguished in a blur of steel and blood. Through the chaos, Avon moves with a chilling indifference, his gaze as murky and hollow as the battlefield itself. The dust settles on a blood-soaked field. With the death of Lord Farius Winston confirmed, the tide of war has officially turned. Amidst the carnage, a battered Avon is approached by Riku, who is genuinely impressed by the soldiers' unexpected victory. A reward is promised, though it comes with a grim reminder. In this world, the only way to collect a prize is to survive long enough to see it. The adrenaline fades, leaving behind a crushing weight of fatigue. As Riku checks on him, Avon admits he is terribly tired of sensation. Riku calls the proof of life, but the respite is short-lived. Squad leader Yen appears, bloodied and scarred from the fray, yet still commanding. He forces the men to stay awake and hydrated, reminding them that even in the wake of victory, the vigilance of a soldier never ends. A heavy silence falls over the blood-soaked earth. With the fall of Farius and Mird, the tide has finally turned, bringing the hope that this endless nightmare of a war will soon come to an end. The shockwaves of defeat reach the remaining commanders. For Soren, the news is a death knell. He had spent 5 years betraying his own motherland and groveling before the Farius Empire, only for it all to end in failure. Consumed by regret and desperation, he can only weep for his daughter as he prepares to surrender. Betrayal comes with a heavy price. As Soren attempts to surrender, he is suddenly surrounded by the men of Saria. Filled with rage and hatred, the soldiers recognize the man who sold out his own country, demanding the death of the traitor who brought ruin to their families and farms. A futile apology in the face of absolute hatred. Cornered by the spears of those he betrayed, Soren is left to wonder what he could have done differently as the cycle of violence finally catches up to him, a hollow victory. With the capital of Mard finally fallen, Avon and his squad are tasked with maintaining order in Edinburgh. But as he stands amidst the conquest, he can't shake the feeling that he simply doesn't belong. A lavish invitation or a hidden trap. As the squad finds themselves inside a grand residence, the soldiers whisper in confusion about why they've been brought here. While some hope for a reward, Commander Ian quickly shuts down their speculation with a sharp reminder that he can hear everything. A taste of luxury, or a subtle test. As they are served tea in the grand residence, the sheer elegance of the setting leaves Avon and his squad feeling completely out of their element. Even the simple act of drinking tea becomes a source of anxiety, as Commander Ian warns them about the quiet, refined etiquette of the nobility, a masterclass in etiquette. While the rest of the squad is sweating in panic, terrified of breaking some royal rule, Avon is perfectly at ease. He might be a stranger to this world's customs, but his memories of his former life as a Japanese salaryman make him look like a natural for Avon. This isn't a stressful test, it's just a rare chance to enjoy a truly fine cup of tea. A taste of home in a foreign land. Avon closes his eyes, savoring the refined flavor of the tea luxury he hasn't experienced in years. But while he looks every bit the nobleman, his squad members are far from impressed. Baffled by his sudden poise, they can't help but wonder if the simple farmer has been hiding a secret side all along. The awkwardness of the tea party is interrupted by the arrival of a new figure enter. A man hailed as a war hero, despite his childlike aura. While the squad is taken aback, Avon quietly analyzes the newcomer, wondering about the man behind the legend. The war hero speaks. Sign 2 reveals that he knows the truth. It won Jeff's cavalry, but the infantry who took down Winston. Admitting has been outdone, he offers his praise and rewards, leaving the squad stunned by his surprisingly formal demeanor. The praise takes a personal turn. After acknowledging Ian and the squad as treasures of the country, Ren's gaze shifts to Walm. With unsettling precision, he recites Walm's history from his border battles to the magic he learned from Willard, labeling the young soldier as a powerful weapon for his leader. A terrifying talent revealed. Ren is deeply impressed by Walm's ability to wield Ignis Fatuus, the legendary blue fire said to send its victims to the netherworld. Recognizing that such power is usually reserved for great heroes or elite adventurers, Ren is profoundly relieved that such a dangerous weapon belongs to the Hysark Empire. A relic of a forgotten rampage, Ren presents a mysterious horned mask, revealing it once belonged to a party of otherworlders who terrorized the 3 major nations. Intrigued by the fact that the original owner also wielded the legendary Ignis Fatuus, Ren encourages a hesitant Walm to try it on. A haunting connection to the past. As Walm dons the mysterious mask, he is suddenly struck by a wave of déjà vu, feeling a ghostly link to the world he left behind. Ren is impressed, declaring that the mask suits him perfectly and will strike terror into the hearts of all who oppose him. A sudden shift in atmosphere. What started as a curious connection to his past quickly turns into a nightmare as Walm is seized by an overwhelming force. The mask isn't just a trophy, it's a curse that leaves everyone in the room trembling in terror. A cursed artifact or a perfect match? Ren laughs off the panic, explaining that the mask simply harmonizes with the wearer's emotions. He reveals that the mask possesses its own will and is incredibly picky, meaning it has officially chosen Walm as its suitable owner. A strange gift for a strange life. While his comrades bicker over whether he should keep the mysterious mask, Walm finds a grim sense of acceptance. Having already died once and been reborn into this brutal world of magic and war, a sentient mask is just another part of his new, murky reality. A grim sight awaits them. As they walk, Cian is unsettled by the piles of dead-mirrored soldiers littering the grounds of a grand estate. Looking upon the carnage, Wam is reminded of the fragility of power. He realizes that these desperate men, left leaderless, likely rushed here in hopes of finding a treasure trove, only to meet a brutal end. Greed leads to a gruesome end. Wam looks upon the corpses of mired soldiers, reflecting on the irony of those who betrayed their lord for wealth, only to end up as rotting meat. As he and Cian move forward, they realize the betrayal ran deep, with commoners joining the insurgency to wipe out the mired kinship. In this desolate place, the only thing that remains is the cold reality of war. The carnage doesn't end with the battle. With the death toll still rising, Wam and his squad are ordered to maintain public order. Their grim task is to hunt down the remaining fallen soldiers and looters hiding in the city, and dispose of them to ensure the operation continues smoothly. The line between a soldier and a civilian becomes blurred in the chaos of war. A captured man begs for mercy, swearing he has never seen a battlefield, but a fresh arrow wound betrays him, as the soldiers offer him forced labor as an alternative to execution. Wam looks on with murky eyes, wondering if the desperate man they've caught was ever truly a soldier at all. The city is still echoing with the sounds of chaos. As Wam and his squad investigate the noise of a skirmish, they stumble upon a gruesome sight: a room filled with corpses. Even for soldiers in this brutal war, the level of slaughter here is excessive, a scene of absolute horror. The victims are left broken, their lives shattered by the very soldiers meant to maintain order. As the perpetrators are captured, the punishment is revealed to be a mere whipping, a sentence that feels insultingly light to Wam given the brutality of the crimes. A chilling lesson in pain. In response to Wam's doubts by detailing the sheer agony of a whipping, describing how the first lash brings screams and the subsequent ones peel away skin and flesh, ensuring that even those who lose consciousness are jolted awake by the next strike. Fear is a powerful tool for submission. The threat of the whip is put into practice as soldiers intimidate the captives, leaving one man trembling in absolute terror. The squad leader offers a grim deal: surrender quietly now or face the full, agonizing brutality of the lashes. Amidst the panic and desperation, Wam watches on, his expression remaining cold and empty. A cold, heartless dismissal, and makes it clear that morality has no place in this war, leaving Wam to sink further into a hollow silence. Alone under the dark night sky, the weight of the bloodshed continues to erode his soul, leaving his eyes murkier than ever. A heavy silence falls. Wam retreats into the solitude of the night, the glow of a cigarette the only light in the oppressive darkness. Surrounded by a desolate landscape and a cold, crescent moon, he is left alone with the crushing weight of his own numbness. A fleeting moment of peace is shattered. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Wam barely manages to keep his eyes open, longing for sleep. But as he drifts, a presence emerges from the shadows. Startled, Wam demands to know who is there, only to be met by a menacing stranger. The figure, armed and imposing, coldly asks if he is a resting High-Cirque soldier or a desperate straggler from Myard, giving him one final chance to identify himself. Trust is a luxury in a land of war. Wam confronts the mysterious pair, who plead for mercy and claim to be refugees fleeing a city overrun by thieves. They look like innocent citizens, but in this desolate world, Wam knows that appearances can be deceiving. A facade of fragility or a calculated lie. Wam presses the older man on his military past, but the answer he receives doesn't align with what he sees. While the man claims to be a mere retiree, his sturdy posture and the soft, unworked hands of the young girl beside him tell a different story. Even as the man weaves a tragic tale of a lost family and a sheltered granddaughter, Wam's gaze remains cold and analytical, refusing to be swayed by a sob story. The facade begins to crumble. As the young lady stammers, unable to justify their claims, Wam can't help but burst into a cold, mocking laughter at their transparent lies. A sudden shift in mood. Wam stops his mocking laughter, finding the young lady's innocence almost endearing. With a smirk, he warns her that her beauty could make her a target for bad soldiers and decides to let them go. As they depart, he offers them some rations, a rare, fleeting moment of humanity in a world that has stripped him of almost everything. A small spark of kindness in a world of darkness. Wam hands over the food, reassuring the young lady that it isn't poisoned. As she offers a soft, grateful thank you, Wam remains distant, admitting to himself that this act of mercy is merely a way to lessen the crushing weight of his own guilt. A flicker of kindness in a sea of blood. As Wam watches the strangers fade into the darkness, he is haunted by a crushing realization. He is an invader. He wonders if they pitied him, knowing that he likely slaughtered the very people they loved. To Wam, giving a starving girl a bit of food is a hollow gesture that can never truly wash away the stains of war. The mask of gratitude vanishes the moment they are out of sight. Kian 3 collapses in agony, haunted by the memory of the High-Cirque army slaughtering her family and erasing Myard from the map. To her, Wam's small act of kindness isn't mercy, it is the height of hypocrisy. A flicker of hope amidst the ruins. Consumed by grief, Kian 3 is reminded that she carries her father's will and is the only one who can protect Mard. Determined to do whatever she can, she accepts her burden as they hurry towards Celta. 2 months later, the silence is shattered by the roar of war. A wave of soldiers charges forward with blood-curdling screams, storming the walls of a fortress in a chaotic frenzy. But amidst the slaughter, a frantic question echoes through the carnage. What happened to Commander Dewey? The battlefield is a symphony of screams and steel. As the Hycerc army relentlessly hammers against the fortress, the defenders can only curse the barbarians in a desperate futile struggle to hold the line. A wall of noise and steel. The Hycerc soldiers roar in unison, their voices echoing to shatter the defenders' resolve. Frustrated and unable to reach them with arrows, the defenders can only tremble in fear. But the shouting is merely a prelude to the carnage, as the assault turns into a brutal, crushing collision. The cycle of violence never ends. 2 months after the siege of Edinburgh, the Hycerc army shifts its gaze toward Farius. Because Farius had exhausted its strength aiding the Mirrored army, their borders were left dangerously vulnerable, a weakness the Hycerc forces were far too opportunistic to ignore. By first forcing border villages to surrender, and then splitting their battalions, the Hycerc army begins a relentless march into new territory. The invasion of Farius territory is a calculated game of strategy. While the first group pushes deep into the inland districts, Walm and the Ligurian battalion form part of the second group, tasked with encircling the enemy and seizing the strategic Refen mine. Amidst the tension of the march, the soldiers share a few grim jokes, masking the brutality of the mission ahead. A slow death is far more terrifying than a quick one. With the Farius soldiers cornered in their forts and holding the high ground, Ion deems a direct assault too costly. Instead, he implements a sadistic strategy. Use harassing fire to trap them in their own defenses and systematically break their spirits. As the trapped soldiers scream in futile rage, the Hycerc troops simply laugh, treating the desperation of their enemies as a mere performance. A slow, agonizing death. For Walm, this strategic game of starvation and harassment is almost refreshing compared to the mindless slaughter he's used to. 2 weeks pass as the Hycerc army relentlessly breaks the enemy's will, leaving the trapped soldiers to scream in despair while Walm spends his downtime sharpening his skills for the final blow. A dangerous power requires absolute control. Ion warns Walm that his Ignis Fatuus is far from normal and could incinerate an entire platoon if he slips up. To prevent a catastrophe, they found the perfect spot in an abandoned tunnel where Walm can finally practice his destructive abilities in safety. Unleashing the Inferno, focusing every ounce of his will, Walm triggers the devastating Ignis Fatuus, filling the tunnel with a violent explosion of fire. Even Ian is left stunned by how quickly Walm was able to manifest such abnormal power. Too fast to react, Walm lunges forward with lethal precision, catching the armored soldier completely off guard. Before the enemy can even process the attack, Walm has already seized control of the clash. A display of raw power, the armored soldier is left completely spent, unable to do anything but groan and acknowledge Walm's overwhelming strength. As the other soldiers watch, some are amused by Walm's signature efficiency, while others are driven into a competitive frenzy by the sheer gap in their abilities. A single blow is all it took. The armored soldier is sent reeling, completely outmatched by Walm's terrifying combat efficiency. As the man crashes to the dirt, his comrades watch with smirks, their laughter echoing across the camp. Progress comes at a price. A few days later, Walm has finally managed to control his volatile power to some extent, but as he catches his breath, he realizes an even bigger problem has emerged, a dangerous trade-off. Walm discovers that while he can now control Ignis Fatuus, he can only sustain it for a mere 30 to 40 seconds. Pushing past this limit doesn't just drain his mana, it cripples his physical body and could even cost him his life. Exhausted and at his limit, he is interrupted by Luca, admitting that he simply cannot push himself any further. A moment of peace amidst the chaos. After pushing his limits to the brink of collapse, Walm finds himself in a far more domestic struggle, debating with Luca whether using a deadly combat spell to heat up chicken is a waste of power or a culinary necessity. From a weapon of war to a kitchen appliance. Walm is left exasperated, as his commander justifies, using Ignis Fatuus to cook, claiming the aroma of good food to break the enemy's spirit. Despite the absurdity, the soldiers are more than happy to indulge in a tasty meal, proving that even on a brutal battlefield, the desire for a decent meal outweighs everything else. A rare moment of satisfaction. Despite his earlier complaints, Walm finds the food tasty, though he quickly denies it to Luca, claiming he's only eating to replenish the mana drained by his destructive magic. As he looks around the military camp, a grim realization sinks in this brief. Mundane peace is only temporary. The brief respite is over. A commander observes that the enemy's will to fight is breaking, with more soldiers fleeing and surrendering in desperation. Yet, as the tactical discussion continues, Wom remains haunted by the grim realities of the front line, his thoughts turning to the relentless threat of harassing fire, a cruel bit of psychological warfare. The commander explains that for the enemy soldiers trapped and starving within their walls, the mere scent of their feast is a torture that erodes their will to fight. Cruelty is just another tool of war. The commander finishes his lesson on how the scent of a feast can break a starving man's spirit, leaving Wom feeling sickened by the reality of their tactics. Despite his disgust, Wom realizes he must learn this cold efficiency to survive. 3 days pass. The peace is shattered in an instant. A colossal explosion of blue fire rips through the fortress walls, leaving the defenders in absolute terror. As the tower crumbles, a panicked soldier can only wonder how the High-Cirque forces managed to breach their defenses. Chaos erupts within the stronghold. As the blue flames ravage their defenses, a hooded figure emerges from the smoke, barking orders to extinguish the fire and hunt down the intruders. With a cold, murderous gaze, the command is clear. Find and annihilate every last High-Cirque soldier. The devastating blue fire wasn't a random strike, it was a calculated plan. In a meeting before the attack, the commander explains that the fort's narrow geography makes a standard assault impossible to break the deadlock. Wom is chosen for a high-risk night raid, tasked with using his Ignis Fatuus to sow absolute mayhem within the enemy walls. A simple plan. Or a suicide mission. The commander lays it out. Wom is to create total chaos with his flames, paving the way for the 2nd Battalion to storm the fort. Internally, Wom is seething, cursing the commander and lamenting the lack of rights for a common soldier, but he remains silent. With the orders set, the target looms ahead, a massive, imposing fortress waiting to be burned. The target is in sight. Infiltrate the area, create a diversion, and pave the way for the main assault. It's a nasty job, but there's no way out. Fine, let's do it. The operation is underway. Moving under the cover of darkness, Wom and his squad stealthily approach the enemy stronghold. As they advance, Neri notes Wom's impressive aptitude for fire and wind elements, though he warns him that he lacks versatility in other forms of magic. For Wom, this mission marks the first time Hell put these specific skills to the test in a real battle. A quick lesson in the heat of battle. Taking Willard's advice to heart, Wom tests his limits and launches himself skyward with a powerful burst, leaving the enemy soldiers staring in absolute shock. A lethal descent from the shadows. Slom slams into the enemy ranks like a bolt of lightning, obliterating one soldier instantly and leaving the others frozen in sheer terror. With a cold click of his tongue, he prepares to carve through the rest. A whirlwind of steel and blood. Wom tears through the enemy ranks, leaving nothing but corpses in his wake. With the initial shockwave settled, he turns his cold gaze toward the objective, the defensive tower. No more hiding. Wom slips into the heart of the defensive tower, catching the soldiers completely off guard. As they scream in terror, a cold grin forms beneath his mask since he's already inside. There's no longer any need to be sneaky. No more hiding. Wom unleashes the devastating power of Ignis Fatuus, transforming the inner chamber into a hellish furnace. The soldiers are caught completely off guard, their screams of agony filling the air as they are consumed by the overwhelming flames. Pure chaos ensues. Confused by the sudden blast and strange sounds, the soldiers scramble for answers, only to be met with the terrifying realization that the enemy has already breached their defenses. Total chaos erupts. A massive explosion rips through the defensive tower, signaling the start of a brutal raid. Panic spreads like wildfire as the soldiers scramble to take their positions, terrified by the sudden onslaught. Pure chaos erupts as the garrison watches in disbelief. How can a stone tower be consumed by blue flames? But there is no time for questions. Arrows rain down on the panicked soldiers, forcing them to scramble for cover and call for their archers to repel the High-Cirque assault. The tower has fallen. With the defensive position seized, the High-Cirque soldiers now focus on holding their ground until the main army arrives. To prevent the enemy from regrouping or calling for help, a cold order is given. Burn the passage and leave no way back. Understood with cold precision, Wom sets the passage ablaze, turning the narrow corridor into a furnace of agony for the trapped enemy soldiers. The fire has died down, but the horror remains. As the adrenaline fades, Wom is left alone with the wreckage of his own conscience. He realizes that the morals he clung to from his previous life have been shattered by the brutality of war. Haunted by the screams of those he incinerated with Ignis Fatuus, he comes to a grim conclusion. A soldier is nothing more than a murderer. In a moment of deep despair, he wonders if he was ever meant for a peaceful life, or if he was always destined to be a monster in this cruel world. Silence the guilt. Wom forces himself to shut down his remaining morality, accepting the cold, hard truth. In this world, a soldier has no right to veto the blood on his hands. Pure chaos erupts as the flames tear through the fortress. Terrified soldiers scream in agony and desperation, realizing they are trapped by a fire they cannot extinguish. With their defenses crumbling, the only order left is to fall back. Trapped in the inferno, A lone figure counts the seconds in desperation. With no one coming to their aid and their magic nearly depleted, the flames close in. Just when hope seems lost, unexpected company arrives. Trapped and out of magic, Rumi can only stare in disbelief as a squad of soldiers suddenly appears through the smoke. The blonde soldier steps forward, his gaze sharp as he demands to know if the hooded figure was the one who started the fire. A cold confrontation turns into a game of mockery. Instead of pleading for mercy, the hooded figure throws cryptic insults at their captors, thanking them for the chance and dog food. But the soldiers aren't amused. With a sinister laugh, the helmeted leader delivers a chilling ultimatum. Today, their service is officially over. Magic spent and isolated from his comrades, Wom is left with no choice but to fight. Now it's a raw clash of steel as he unleashes a devastating power move against the Farius soldiers. No magic? No problem. With a sudden explosive burst of speed, Wom catches the armored soldier completely off guard, delivering a crushing blow that leaves the enemy in total shock. Pure, raw violence. With his magic depleted, Wom transforms into a whirlwind of steel, blitzing through the Farius soldiers before they can even process the attack. One final push. Wom musters every last shred of his strength to unleash a devastating Ignis Fatuus, obliterating the Farius soldiers in a blinding explosion of power. One final, explosive burst. Wom's overwhelming strike hits home, shattering the enemy's defense and sending the armored soldier flying backward in a cloud of debris. With a final cry of frustration, the soldier is completely overpowered by Wom's last remaining strength. The impact is absolute. The sheer force of Wom's final strike sends the armored soldier hurtling through the air, followed by a colossal explosion that buries the enemy under a wave of destruction. The dust settles, but the battle is far from over. While the enemy wonders if Hes fallen, Wom is already calculating. He realizes Hes facing a coordinated team, a Bodhi strengthener, a fire-resistant specialist who shielded the others, and a water element user. Now that he understands their division of roles, Wom begins to formulate his next move. No more analyzing. Focus. Wom lunges forward to strike. First, the fire user falls. No room for hesitation. Wom strikes with blinding speed, cutting through the enemy's ranks. Even as he dismantles their defense, he recognizes that every single one of them is a seasoned warrior. Absolute terror. Wom's blitz is so overwhelming that the enemy soldiers are paralyzed, feeling as if they are dancing on a minefield where a single wrong move means instant death. A blur of death! Breaking through the enemy's frozen terror, Wom tears across the battlefield with overwhelming speed. Before they can even process his movement, he crashes into the masked soldier with a primal roar, turning his oppressive killing intent into a violent reality. No more hesitation. With a desperate roar, Wom unleashes the devastating power of Ignis Fatuus, slamming into the masked soldier with everything he has. But beneath the fury, a cold fear lingers. If he exhausts his magic now, there will be no escape from the torture that awaits. Burn it all away. The masked soldier's fire resistance proves utterly useless against the sheer intensity of Wom's flames, leaving them to scream in agony as they are incinerated. The carnage doesn't stop here. With the first target incinerated, Wom doesn't slow down, charging forward with lethal intent. As Rai 2 joins the fray, the remaining soldiers are gripped by terror, realizing they are being crushed by a dual assault they cannot possibly stop. Compassion is a fatal flaw on the battlefield. As Wom watches the enemy prioritize their fallen comrade over their own survival, he deems them bad soldiers. With cold efficiency, he strikes again, turning their empathy into their downfall. No room for hesitation on the battlefield. With cold, lethal efficiency, Wom carves through his enemy in a single blinding strike. Death arrives in a flash. The blade carves through flesh and armor with terrifying ease, leaving the soldier with nothing but a final, panicked realization of his own demise. A flash of steel and it's over. With cold mechanical precision, Wom leaves another body in his wake, leaving the remaining soldiers frozen in absolute terror. The slaughter is nearly complete. Standing amidst the carnage, Wom's cold, murky eyes lock on to the final survivor. Paralyzed by sheer terror, the soldier realizes with horror that he is the only one left to face this killing machine. No room for mercy. With a single brutal strike, Wom silences the last survivor, leaving nothing but blood and silence in his wake. The final scream of a dying man. As the last enemy desperately pleads for his life, Wom's blade cuts through him with cold, mechanical precision, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The silence of the battlefield is shattered by one last desperate scream. With cold, mechanical precision, Wom drives his blade home, extinguishing the final spark of life in his enemy's eyes. The kill wasn't enough. Lost in a sudden, terrifying bloodlust, Wom descends upon the fallen, hacking at the corpses with a manic scream, his humanity slipping further away with every blood-soaked strike. A descent into madness. With eyes devoid of humanity, Wom relentlessly hacks away at the corpses, his blade raining down in a mindless, violent frenzy. His comrades can only watch in stunned horror, witnessing the terrifying transformation of their fellow soldier into a blood-soaked monster. Pure, unadulterated madness. Walm doesn't stop at the kill, his blade continuing to rain down on the lifeless bodies in a gruesome display of bloodlust. A descent into pure madness. Lost in a haze of blood and hatred, Walm continues to tear into the fallen. His eyes vacant and his spirit broken in this moment, the soldier is gone, only the monster remains. A descent into madness. Walm continues his gruesome work, hacking into the remains of an armored soldier with a terrifying vacant intensity. A descent into madness. Walm continues to obsessively mutilate the fallen, his mind completely consumed by a horrific manic bloodlust. The storm of violence finally breaks. Walm's frenzy vanishes as quickly as it arrived, leaving him hollow, breathless, and clinging to the remains of his enemy. His comrades can only watch in stunned silence, wondering if he has completely lost his consciousness or his humanity to the horror of the battlefield. A ghostly wish for safety echoes in his mind as Walm slowly returns to his senses, gasping for air amidst the silence. He looks around at the carnage he wrought, the horror finally sinking in. They are all dead. A nightmare that refuses to end. Just as Walm begins to process the carnage around him, a terrifying realization. The resistance guy didn't die in the fire, and now he stands before him as a skinless, charred horror. A nightmare returns from the ashes. Just as the charred monstrosity lunges at a paralyzed Walm, a mysterious archer arrives on the scene, greeting him with an unsettlingly casual tone. "Yo, still alive?" A rescue with a side of sarcasm. The mysterious archer admits that while Walm saved him, the timing was far too close for comfort. He reminds Walm that he is still human, and had he stayed in that raging fire any longer, he would have been nothing more than minced meat. A brief moment of respite amidst the ruins. Walm tells the injured archer to stay put while he fetches a medic, jokingly telling him to wait patiently with his charred roommate. Left in the heavy silence, the archer stares at the blackened remains, recalling the devastating power of his own ignis fatuus. Left in the silence of the aftermath, the horror is only beginning. The archer stares at the incinerated mask of the fallen enemy, a grim reminder of the fire that nearly claimed him. But the quiet is shattered by the manic screams and laughter of soldiers in the distance. Him is about to break through the castle gates. Disgusted by the bloodlust he hears, he can only wonder how anyone could enjoy such a nightmare. Beyond the blood and fire of the front lines, a grander conspiracy unfolds. The Kingdom of Christ, the Commercial Federation of Liberatoa, and the Kingdom of Farius gather in secret, plotting their next move to crush the High-Cirque Empire. Enter a man of influence and intrigue. This is Unifor, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Liberatoa, arriving to join the conspiracy against the High-Cirque Empire. A sudden surge of magic inside the castle walls leaves Unifor completely bewildered. Just as he questions the madness of such an act, a mysterious scarred man appears, calmly smoking a cigar and mocking Hugo's relentless work ethic. The weight of power fills the room as the true architects of the alliance are revealed. While Ciel remains nonchalant, the meeting is presided over by King Leon of the Christ Kingdom and King Aki, whose own lands are currently being ravaged by the High-Cirque army. The stage is set for a discussion that will determine the fate of the war. A king with a gaze that no longer wavers. While reflecting on how much he has changed from the meek man he once was, King Aki notices a striking woman among the delegates. Confused by her presence in a room dedicated to the grim strategies of three nations, he asks her where she hails from. The mystery is solved as the woman introduces herself as Three Mayod. However, the focus shifts abruptly, leaping 3 weeks into the future to the Rafen mine base following the fall of the fort. Finally, the waiting is over. Walm asks if they are finished, and upon receiving confirmation from a fellow soldier, he expresses his relief that their stagnant days are at an end. Meanwhile, while their strongholds are under attack, the Farius soldiers holed up in the mines are left to slowly destroy themselves. A brutal ultimatum ends the stalemate. Despite having the provisions to hold out, the mental exhaustion of the siege and a ruthless threat to kill every citizen and soldier forced the surrender of Revan Mine Castle and all its forts. Walm simply notes the efficiency of the threat and prepares to move on. The silence of defeat is deafening. As Walm makes his way out, he passes the surrendered Farius soldiers' broken men shivering in the cold. With a hollow, murky gaze, he leaves the ruins behind, stepping forward into the endless cycle of war, back with his own people at last. As the soldiers marvel at the efficiency of restoration magic, Walm is greeted by Cian, both of them bearing the rugged marks of their recent struggles. Reunited at last. But the news is far from happy. Revealed the Dwawi squad thrown into the brutal fight to take down the castle, and things have been grueling. But as Cian mentions Burrito, a chilling realization hits Walm, leaving him frozen in disbelief. The dreaded tragedy is finally revealed, but it's not what Walm expected. Ellen is absolutely devastated because an enemy magician ruined his prized coxcomb hairstyle. While Ellen wails in agony over his lost look, Wom can only stare in disbelief, noting that at least he's physically unharmed even if Cian thinks the new mess actually suits him. A brief moment of levity in a brutal world. After teasing Ellen about his ruined hair, the conversation quickly shifts back to the grim reality of war. With Commander Dewey called away to finish clearing the mines, Wom and his comrades prepare for their next objective, a full-scale invasion into the heart of Farius. While the soldiers prepare for invasion, the focus shifts to the halls of power. A woman, the daughter of former King Youth, stands as the representative for the crumbling principality of Miard. Despite the man's skepticism about Miard's relevance, she firmly declares that they still possess the land of Sirta. A shocking revelation changes the tide of the discussion. While Sirta is an economic powerhouse, it was long guarded by the terrifying lake dragon, a monster, so powerful that even Hyserk avoided it. However, Sa drops a bombshell. The dragon has been subjugated. Stunned by the news, the leaders question who could possibly achieve such an impossible feat, only to be told it was the work of that person. The mystery is finally unveiled. Standing before the fallen lake dragon is Mikafor, one of the 3 legendary heroes of Christ, a master of fire capable of scorching even the mightiest beasts. His devastating holy strike leaves all who witness it in absolute awe. A legendary figure emerges, a Kima unit, just a hero of Christ, but a visitor from another world. Blessed with overwhelming power, the assassin from Earth has arrived. War reveals the true nature of men. While the elite discuss legends and politics, the reality on the ground is a living nightmare. Hyserk soldiers turn the land of Farius into a playground for cruelty, boasting about their loot and the atrocities they commit with total impunity. The cruelty of the Hyserk army knows no bounds. Beyond the looting and abuse, they leave only ruins and screams in their wake, turning the peaceful villages of Farius into a living nightmare of collapsing homes and sheer terror. The hunters suddenly become the hunted. Just as the Hyserk soldiers revel in their destruction, a mysterious force strikes from the dust. Panic erupts as they realize these attackers aren't the soldiers they're used to, and now they're completely surrounded. The hunters have become the hunted. The Hyserk soldiers realize with horror that they aren't facing the local militia, but the elite army of Christ. The power gap is devastating, leaving the looters slaughtered in the streets. With no hope of victory, the only order left is to drop everything and run for their lives. Desperate for survival, the Hyserk soldiers scramble to escape the carnage. They try to use the dust as cover to flee the raid, lamenting the loot they are forced to leave behind, but their hope is short-lived. As they panic over the unexpected presence of the Christ army, they find their path blocked by a cold, overwhelming force. For those who try to resist, the message is clear: surrender or perish. A total massacre. 3 Saria battalions of the Hyserk army were completely wiped out, leaving around 700 soldiers dead in their wake. A sudden reversal of fortune. Shock and disbelief ripple through the Hyserk ranks as they question the sudden order to retreat. They were promised an invasion of the Farius interiors, yet now they face a shocking reality that even the War Council can barely justify. A nightmare becomes reality. The officer delivers the crushing blow. Farius, Christ, Liberatoa, and the remnants of Miard have joined forces. As the weight of the news sinks in, Neri and Ellen realize with horror that every single nation in the northern archipelago has now become their enemy. A crushing reality sets in. Wom can hardly believe that the rival nations of the northern archipelago would set aside their differences to unite against them. But the true horror lies in the numbers. While Hyserk can barely scrape together 24,000 men, the enemy alliance commands a monstrous army of over 60,000. A bold move that changes the tide of war. King Aki takes the lead, proposing a grand alliance between 4 nations. By unifying their military strength and establishing Lake Sirta as a shared economic zone, they forge a formidable coalition designed to crush the Hyserk Empire. A chilling atmosphere settles over the summit, while the stakes are impossibly high, deciding the very glory and fall of nation presence some participants is nothing short of unsettling. Nari can't help but feel a sense of dread, finding Milo's demeanor utterly creepy. For him, however, the impending chaos of the war sounds like nothing but fun. The tide has turned, and the Hyserk Empire is forced to fall back. With the enemy's numbers dwarfing their own, the army begins a staged withdrawal, abandoning a valuable mine in the process. Despite the bitterness of the retreat, Wom and his comrades must push towards Sarajevo Fortress, where they will prepare for a final, decisive clash against the 4-nation alliance. A crushing weight of reality. Wom stares into the distance, the number 60,000 echoing in his mind like a death knell. Against such an overwhelming force, the retreat is inevitable. But it won't be a simple surrender. They may be falling back, but they intend to make the enemy pay a heavy price for every inch of ground they seize. The retreat comes with a cold, calculated price. To ensure the enemy gains nothing from their departure, The order is given to cave in the mine, meaning every prisoner of war trapped inside will be slaughtered. While some soldiers lament the loss of potential labor, the grim reality of the High-Cirque War leaves no room for sentiment. A cold realization sets in. To ensure the safety of the retreating army, Wam and his fellow soldiers are tasked with holding the line within the mines. While a defensive battle is theoretically more manageable, the atmosphere remains tense. "Yes, sir," they shout in unison, bracing themselves for the brutal stand ahead. The retreat is far from peaceful. In a desperate bid to secure their position, Wam screams for the ladders to be raised, but the enemy is ready. A hail of arrows rains down, turning the issue into a bloodbath as soldiers are cut down before they can even reach the top. A rain of death. The assault turns into a slaughter as massive boulders crush the soldiers, sending them screaming from their ladders. In the midst of the chaos, a chilling realization hit the main force of the Four-Nation Alliance is from Liberatoa, a foe they haven't faced in a long time. A rain of stone and death. As the High-Cirque soldiers struggle to climb, massive boulders are hurled from above, turning the assault into a slaughterhouse. One soldier can only watch in horror, pleading for others to flee before they too are crushed into a bloody pulp. The tide is turning. As the enemy gains momentum on the left wing, the commander issues a grim command. With a single word, Wam is unleashed to give the invaders a warm welcome. A whirlwind of violence. Wam crashes into the left wing, decapitating an enemy soldier in a single blinding strike. As the helmet clatters to the ground, the surrounding soldiers can only watch in horror at the cold, terrifying efficiency of the man who just joined the fight. A cold wind of death arrives. Recognized by the enemy, Wam doesn't waste a second, preparing to unleash a power that will turn the tide of the battle. A warning before the storm. Wam screams for everyone to take cover, urging them to get clear before he unleashes his devastating power. As the atmosphere grows heavy with tension, the enemy soldiers can only stare in horror, sensing the catastrophic attack about to be unleashed upon them. The mere mention of his name is enough to spark pure terror. As Wam readies his devastating ignis fatuus technique, the enemy soldiers are gripped by a sudden, paralyzing dread. Knowing the carnage that follows, they scream in desperation, urging each other to kill him before he can unleash the storm. Absolute devastation. In a blinding flash of power, Wam unleashes ignis fatuus, obliterating the enemy soldiers and tearing through the battlefield in a single catastrophic explosion. Pure agony, the blast leaves the enemy soldiers screaming in terror as they are consumed by flames that refuse to die. But as Wam watches the carnage, he feels nothing's already grown used to the horror of war. The scent of death lingers in the air, the smell of people burning alive. Wam muses, his expression chillingly vacant. Though he admits the experience is awful no matter how often he encounters it, there is no trace of remorse or horror in his eyes. He simply turns his back on the agony and walks calmly back toward his unit. A hero to some, a monster to others. As Wam returns, his comrades swarm him with gratitude, relieved that such terrifying power is on their side. While they marvel at the hellfire that broke the enemy's spirit, Wam remains distant, already being summoned back to the Due squad for the next phase of the operation. Back to the grind. Ian breaks the news about their next assignment, calling it the most disgusting deployment. Yet a grim reality has simply learned to live with. The tide of war shifts as the enemy prepares their next strike. Kai of Liberatoa eyes the High-Cirque fortress with grim determination. Knowing his army's fate depends on its fall, for the sake of his homeland he vows to carve a bloody opening through the High-Cirque defenses. A nightmare forged in flames. Kai is haunted by the fire from hell, a skill so horrific it acts as a deadly poison against group troops. With growing frustration, he recalls the grim cost of this power. An entire company of soldiers and even the previous commander were utterly annihilated. Enough dwelling on the horror. With a hardened gaze and a thunderous command, Kai rallies his troops, ordering the company to march forward into the fray. The enemy isn't walking blindly into the flames. Recognizing the terrifying threat posed by Wam, the Liberatoa soldiers carefully position themselves for a coordinated strike, even soaking their armor in water to guard against the devastating hellfire as they close in on the fortress. Fear is a powerful motivator, and even Kai isn't immune to it. He admits that he, like his men, is terrified of the devastating ignis fatuus, the same fire that claimed the previous commander. But survival isn't the only goal here. With a grim determination to break through, he casts aside his doubts and gives the cold final command. Commence attack. The silence is shattered as the Liberatoa army surges forward in a fierce charge. As the attackers storm the fortress, the High-Cirque defenders are thrown into a panic, shouting for everyone to get below the wall before the onslaught hits. A rain of arrows descends upon the charging army, cutting down soldiers in a brutal display of defense. Amidst the screams and carnage, Kai bellows for his men to hurry and set up the ladders immediately, desperate to breach the walls before the slaughter consumes them all. A glimmer of hope amidst the carnage. As the ladders finally hit the walls, Kai is stunned to find the losses are lighter than expected. For the first time, he feels the tide turning. Maybe, just maybe, the fortress will fall today. Confidence turns to carnage in an instant. Just as the Liberatoa forces reach the top of the walls, Walm unleashes the terrifying Ignis Fatuus, incinerating the attackers in a series of brutal explosions. With his men screaming in agony and falling from the ladders, a horrified Kai is forced to abandon the assault and order an immediate retreat to the trenches. Total chaos erupts. The Liberatoa soldiers scramble in panic, desperately trying to extinguish the flames. As the smoke clears, a horrifying realization sets in. The defenders have set fire to their own castle corridors, sacrificing their own stronghold without a second thought just to incinerate the attackers. The fire may have sown panic, but the command to advance remains. Kai surges forward, his voice booming over the chaos as he orders his men to ignore the terror and storm the walls once more. Chaos erupts on the walls. As the Liberatoa soldiers attempt to push forward, they are suddenly thrown from the heights. Panic spreads among the ranks as men plummet to their deaths, leaving those who fall trembling in absolute horror. A scene of absolute carnage. Kai arrives to find the aftermath of the failed breach, staring in disbelief at the scattered remains of his men. He can only curse the ruthless efficiency of the defenders. A bitter realization. Kai finally sees through the enemy's ploy while his troops struggled to breach the fort. The opposition was simply buying time to retreat. The fire was a calculated move to cover the escape of the rear guard. Quickly regaining his composure, Kai orders the first platoon to extinguish the blaze while the others remain on high alert. The victory feels hollow as a scout rushes back with devastating news. The military road ahead has been completely destroyed, leaving the army stranded. As Kai looks upon the wreckage, the grim truth sinks in. The enemy lured them into a pointless struggle for a fort they were happy to abandon, playing the Liberatoa army for fools. A ruthless price for survival. The High-Cirque army leaves nothing behind, systematically demolishing their own homes and choking the roads with debris. Every ruined building is a desperate gamble to buy time for their retreating comrades, proving that in this war, survival often requires destroying everything you once called home, tearing down their own home to survive. Exhausted and drenched in sweat, Walm pushes his body to the limit, helping his comrades turn their settlements into a wasteland of rubble. As they frantically destroy every pillar and road, the arrival of the platoon commander signals that the brutal work is far from over. The sudden arrival of the Liberatoa army brings the scorched earth operation to a crashing halt. Amidst the chaos and the urgent orders to retreat, a weary Walm looks on with a grim smile, finally ready for the fight has been waiting for. The retreat is frantic, and the pressure is mounting. While his comrades urge him to hurry or risk a brutal defeat, a worn-out Walm prioritizes a quick drink, unapologetically helping himself to some water before the coming storm. No time for lingering. With the enemy closing in, the soldiers scramble in a desperate rush to keep the line. As they march away, Walm feels a grim sense of relief, finally saying goodbye to that damned mine. It's time to move. A new stage for the slaughter. The battle will take place at Sarajevo Fortress. A desperate gamble for time. While the Quadruple Alliance had been making rapid progress, High-Cirque fought back with a ruthless strategy of attrition collapse beyond mountains, with destroying bridges and launching relentless raids via cavalry commander Jeff's battalion. These thorough delaying tactics finally paid off, bringing the Anaim's advance to a grinding halt at Ratnan Mine. With the precious time they've bought, the High-Cirque army now makes their way toward the impending clash at Sarajevo Fortress. The advance comes with a heavy price. At the Farius military camp, desperation peaks as a soldier pleads for a healer to save his dying friend. But the news is grim. The mages have exhausted their magic, leaving the wounded Chris soldier to fade away in a battle of attrition, a flicker of hope in a place of despair. An armored knight promises that the wounded will receive treatment, leaving the desperate soldier in disbelief. As he is told to set aside his weapon, the grim scale of the exhausted military camp looms around them, a glimmer of hope in a sea of suffering. Guided by the armored knight, the soldier carries his wounded friend into the crowded medical tent. As they lay him down, a female helper arrives to tend to the injuries, leaving the exhausted soldier in disbelief, a miracle in the midst of despair. With a series of swift, precise movements, the female helper resets the wounded soldier's broken limb in an instant. Stunned by her unnatural efficiency, the soldier realizes she is far more than a mere helper. As he looks around the tent, he realizes that thanks to her, not a single soldier brought in has died. Overwhelmed with emotion, he can only whisper a heartfelt thank you. A miracle worker among the dying. The mysterious helper is revealed to be none other than Avon 6, one of the 3 legendary heroes of the Christ Kingdom. A saint among soldiers. Overwhelmed by her miraculous power, the soldier pours out his gratitude, but Avon 6 only offers a gentle, humble smile, revealing the bittersweet reason for her gift. She heals because she cannot fight, a heart of gold and a spirit of humility. Once the treatment is over, Avon 6 turns to her assistant Eri 2, thanking her for the support that allows her to save lives. Despite her legendary status as a hero, Aen's modesty is so profound that Eri 2 can't help but urge her to have more confidence in her own abilities. As they share this gentle moment, the mention of Yudo and Makoto serves as a reminder that other heroes are close by. A moment of quiet reflection is cut short. Sugimoto Ayane and Maya-san discuss the clash involving Jeff's cavalry battalion, relieved to hear that the soldiers weren't injured. Just as they agree to go visit them together after cleaning, they are interrupted by the arrival of Mika 4. Even heroes feel the weight of war. 4 and Mika 6 catch their breath, admitting that Jeff's cavalry was surprisingly resilient, even dodging their powerful magic. As Sugimoto Ayane comforts the exhausted warriors, she gently asks if they've had a chance to eat yet, bringing a brief moment of normalcy to their grueling day. Nothing beats the promise of a feast after a grueling day of war. Maya-san reveals that the Farius army has provided a lavish spread of white bread, cheese, and sausages. The mention of real food sends Akima Yudo into a frenzy of hunger, completely losing their cool. As they scramble for a meal, the surrounding soldiers look on in curiosity, wondering if these eccentric individuals are truly the legendary 3 Christ heroes from another world. Legendary power, yet barely more than children. Meet the 3 Christ heroes. Sugimoto Ayane, the chantless healer Makoto, the master Yudo, the devastating dragon slayer. To the soldiers, they are terrifyingly overpowered weapons of war, yet they are still just kids who need support. While the world looks to these youths for salvation, the ordinary soldiers are left with a much more pressing concern, the misery of another lunch of beans and potatoes. A meager meal for a soldier in a cruel world. As Wom swallows his rations, a heavy tension fills the air. The inevitable clash between the reincarnated and the transmigrated is finally drawing near, a landscape of absolute ruin. As Wom and his fellow soldiers march through the wreckage of a broken world, the sheer scale of the devastation leaves him speechless. This place is indeed amazing, a monument of stone and power. Standing before them is the imposing Sarajevo fortress, a massive stronghold that dominates the desolate landscape, a fortress of absolute defense, or so it seemed. The Sarajevo fortress stands as a critical choke point on the former mired border, strategically positioned between the territories of the demons, Farius, and Hysirk. While its geography offers an overwhelming advantage to any defender, history tells a different story. Despite its strength, the castle fell in just 2 days during the Hysirk invasion, simply because Mired lacked the manpower to hold it after the Battle of Edinburgh. A sea of soldiers now fills the Sarajevo fortress, a sight that brings back haunting memories of the Battle of Edinburgh. But numbers alone offer little comfort. The atmosphere is bleak as the troops huddle together, forced to survive on raw potatoes while facing the crushing reality of starvation. Perks of the job. While the rest of the army is miserable, chewing on raw, tasteless potatoes, one opportunistic soldier decides to use his magic for a little luxury. He knows he might get in trouble for it, but in his eyes, being a magic user gives him the absolute right to a hot meal. It's a cruel, smug reminder of the gap between the ordinary grunts and those with power. A taste of luxury in a land of starvation. While the magic user basks in the glory of his baked potatoes, a sudden voice calls out Wom's name. The sound sends him into a spiral of pure panic, as he desperately wonders if his disguise has failed and if has finally been exposed. A chilling realization strikes as Milo reveals. He sensed Wom's magic leaking. With a cold gaze, he asks what Wom intends to do. Near soldier to panic and believes being blackmailed into using his Ignis Fatuus just to cook a potato. A small price for a warm meal. To keep Milo's silence, Wom agrees to a trade, letting the man take over his water duty. With his chores gone, Wom uses his Ignis Fatuus to secretly boil some potatoes. Though he can't help but wonder what's become of him, however, the delicious scent is too strong to ignore, and soon, Neri begins to get suspicious. The secret is out. Wom's attempt to keep his magic hidden fails as his comrades corner him, demanding he cook for the entire group. With the soldiers exhausted and starving, the simple desire for boiled potatoes turns into a desperate plea, leaving Wom in a very tight spot, from a soldier to a camp chef. Unable to resist the pressure, Wom finally gives in and agrees to boil potatoes for his exhausted comrades. As he stirs the steaming pot, he can't help but feel pathetic, wondering how he ended up doing something so lame. But for the starving men around him, the smell of hot food is a miracle, drawing in everyone within reach. Word spreads fast in a starving army. Now, even the squad's 3 idiots Linus, Divert, and Dinten have descended upon Wom, demanding their share of the feast. From threats of fighting to promises of finding him a woman, the pressure is relentless. Wom can only stare in defeat as he's forced to organize a long line of hungry soldiers. His role as the unit's reluctant chef now fully cemented. From reluctant cook to a omen cafeteria, To keep the chaos under control, Walm starts charging a single copper coin for his potatoes. For these exhausted soldiers, a simple hot meal is a luxury they haven't had in ages, leaving them genuinely moved. But Walm is already thinking, ahead turns Sishian, in hopes of finding a more sustainable food source. Business is booming. A comrade excitedly suggests that Walm expand his menu to walking chicken pots for even more profit, however. Walm has no interest in becoming a mobile kitchen, shutting the idea down with a sudden and violent blow. Enough is enough. Offended by the idea of becoming a walking chicken pot, Walm lets his temper flare literally. As he overloads the pot with his ignis fatuus, his comrades scramble in a panic, terrified that their precious hot meal is about to be turned into charcoal. The laughter of a hot meal fades as the cold reality of war returns. Settling into their camp, the soldiers receive sobering news. The enemy has made contact with the advance party, with a massive force of over 50,000 soldiers approaching. The looming battle in a few days feels less like a fight and more like a death sentence. The weight of impending death settles over the camp. As the reality of the enemy's overwhelming numbers sinks in, the soldiers share a heavy silence, imagining the piles of corpses that will soon fill the fortress. Praying that they and their comrades survive the coming slaughter, their simple meal now feels like a grim last supper, a final feast before the storm. Despite the crushing weight of their situation, the men try to cling to a shred of normalcy, with Walm teasing Luca about his manners as they head toward their last supper. A moment of heavy silence. Away from the noise of the camp, Walm stares into the distance, the smoke from his cigarette mirroring the haze of his own thoughts. But even in solitude, the bonds of camaraderie persist as Luca finds him, questioning the deep melancholy etched onto his face. A simple question with a haunting answer. Lost in thought, Walm wonders just how long this brutal war will continue. When Luca suggests that it will simply last until they win, the words ring hollow, leaving Walm to contemplate the grim reality of a victory that feels impossibly far away. A cycle of blood and iron. Haunted by Luca's words, Walm realizes the grim truth of the Hyserk Empire. A nation that only knows how to win by force is a nation that can never truly find peace. Trapped in a world where weakness is a death sentence, and the war against four nations seems eternal, Walm is left with a crushing question. If the fighting never ends, what is the point of it all? A bit of tactical optimism in a sea of despair. Noticing Walm's melancholy, Luca teases him for being scared and reminds him that their natural fortress offsets the enemy's numerical advantage. Though Walm agrees, the weight of the endless war still lingers in his distant gaze. A small moment of normalcy amidst the dread. Walm takes a sip of fruit wine, only to be hit by its sharp, sour taste. Luca simply explains that it's oxidized, laughing as Walm reacts with a face of pure disgust. A fleeting moment of peace. Amidst the crushing weight of an endless war, Walm and Luca cherish this irreplaceable time spent together as comrades before the inevitable chaos returns. The silence of the night is shattered. The peace is gone as the Christ Royal Army's Rehazen Night Order and the Hyserk Imperial Army's Ligurian Battalion face off. With a thunderous command to begin chanting, the air crackles with the preparation for a magical onslaught. The silence is gone, replaced by the screams of war. As Commanders Sora III and Ren to roar their orders to kill, the Christ and Hyserk armies collide in a devastating explosion of violence. Hell breaks loose in an instant. The simultaneous barrage turns the battlefield into a slaughterhouse, as explosions rip through the ranks and screams of agony fill the air. In the blink of an eye, the clash of two armies becomes a scene of absolute carnage, a landscape of absolute death. As the smoke clears, the soldiers are met with a horrifying sight, a literal graveyard, where the bodies of both Hyserk and Christ soldiers pile up in endless numbers. While his comrades are shaken by the carnage, Walm looks on with hollow eyes, coldly reminding them that in this war, you eventually get used to such horrors. The grim silence is shattered by the screams of war. In a desperate surge, soldiers scramble up the walls, losing their gear and taking heavy blows in a frantic, bloody melee. While some walls hold, others crumble. Amidst the wreckage of a failed defense, the commander observes the carnage erupting at the adjacent bastion. With their own position secure for now, Walm is ordered to dive back into the chaos to contain the enemy's advance. A frantic call echoes across the bastion there, looking for Walm. Despite his mounting dread, he answers the summons only to be met with a dire warning. The enemy is about to break through the rear's right side. There is no time for hesitation. He is ordered to unleash Ignis Fiduus and crush the enemy's advance. Firefighting or arson? Walm isn't exactly thrilled about his latest assignment. As he's guided toward the critical breach through the smoke of war, his companion has one simple request. Just don't blow them both to pieces. A desperate situation unfolds. Arriving at the breach, Walm is met with a horrifying sight. The enemy is swarming a single point on the slope with overwhelming numbers. With reserves depleted and allies on the brink of collapse, Walm knows that if this line breaks, The bastion will be lost, giving the enemy unstoppable momentum. The stage is set for a massacre. As the enemy swarms the breach in a tight, disciplined formation, Wom recognizes the tactical error. In a world where dense lines usually dominate close combat, such a concentration of troops is nothing more than a feast for his flames. With a cold, calculating gaze, he prepares to unleash the devastating power of Ignis Fatuus. The hunter becomes the hunted. With a single devastating strike of Ignis Fatuus, Wom transforms the enemy's strength into their downfall, obliterating the breach in a roar of flames. In this moment, they are nothing more than prey. A flash of fire, and then absolute carnage. The Ignis Fatuus detonates with devastating power, shredding through the enemy's ranks in an instant. Those who were once a disciplined wall of steel are now nothing more than broken bodies tossed aside like rag dolls. In a single heartbeat, the enemy's greatest strength, their numbers, became their death sentence. Absolute devastation. The Ignis Fatuus doesn't just stop the advance, it obliterates everything in its path. In a heartbeat, the enemy's dense formation is torn apart, leaving behind only charred remains and the echoes of a catastrophic blast. A rain of fire and screams. Standing atop the wall, Wom gazes down at the absolute carnage he has wrought, listening to the desperate wails of the burning enemy. Yet behind the cold gaze of his devil mask, he feels a strange sense of calm. The horror of the battlefield no longer shakes him. Behind the mask, the man disappears. Wom accepts this chilling transformation, realizing that to survive this hell, he must become nothing more than a soldier. As the carnage settles, Soren too shouts in relief, hailing Wom as the one who stopped the enemy's breakthrough. A simple thank you amidst a sea of fire. The devastating power of Ignis Fatuus has left the battlefield in ruins, claiming 100 lives and leaving countless more wounded. Broken and bloodied, the Quadruple Alliance is forced to retreat, their advance halted by a single terrifying strike. The horror doesn't end with the explosion. For those who survived, the nightmare of Ignis Fatuus is a crushing reality, leaving them broken and terrified of the man behind the carnage. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to the Christ Army's field position, where the weight of the defeat begins to settle. Chaos erupts in the medical camp. The Christ Army's field position is a scene of absolute desperation, with medics screaming for more ointment and blood as they struggle to prioritize the dying. Amidst the screams of the wounded, Nina realizes with a shudder that the nature of these injuries has changed. The devastation wrought by Ignis Fatuus is unlike anything they have ever seen. A nightmare in the medical ward. Nina has seen it all: fractures, arrow wounds, even severed limbs. But this is different. In just 1 hour, every single soldier brought in has suffered from severe burns. As she watches a man struggle for air, the horrifying truth sinks in. The fire didn't just burn their skin, it scorched their very windpipes. It's a level of invisible destruction that defies everything she knows. The horror becomes visceral. As Nina looks on, a soldier gasps for air, coughing up blood in a desperate, futile struggle. It is the gruesome confirmation of her worst fear. The fire didn't just burn the skin, it incinerated them from the inside out. The horror only deepens. As Nina moves through the medical camp, she reflects on the cruelty of these wounds. While she knows how to treat burns on the limbs, there is nothing she can do for those burning from within. Amidst the screams of agony and desperate apologies, she is forced to face the grim reality that for many, first aid is no longer enough. A heartbreaking plea for mercy. Clinging to Nina in sheer agony, a dying soldier begs for help, terrified of the end. With no cure for the internal devastation, Nina can only hold his hand and whisper a gentle lie that it's going to be okay as he fades away. The horror of the battlefield doesn't end with the fire. In the medical tents, Myasin discovers a gruesome reality. The heat was so intense that the soldiers' clothing has fused directly into their charred skin. With grim determination, Nina decides the only option is to cut the fabric away. But as the weight of the carnage takes its toll, Myasin suddenly falters, overcome by dizziness as Wom looks on in alarm. The battle doesn't end when the fire stops. Pushing her mana to the absolute limit, Myasin refuses to succumb to exhaustion. Viewing the blood-soaked medical camp as her own personal battlefield, with a final surge of will, she steels her resolve and commands the medics to proceed. The storm of blood and fire has finally subsided, but as silence returns to the medical camp, a horrifying truth emerges. The only ones left in the tents are those beyond saving, piled high in a grim monument to the slaughter. Having given every ounce of her mana and strength to save who she could, Myasin finally succumbs to her exhaustion, collapsing into the dirt, a debt of gratitude born from a nightmare. A wounded survivor, barely clinging to life, offers his heartfelt thanks to the masked figure. As he recalls the terrifying blue flames of Ignis Fatuus that claimed everyone around him, Wom watches in stunned silence, confronted by the devastating impact of his own power. A moment of fragile humanity amidst the carnage. Wom tells the survivor to rest and drink water, but as he looks at the man, the weight of the slaughter crashes down on him. Overwhelmed by guilt and terror, Wom breaks into tears, admitting that he is helplessly afraid of the war they are trapped in. In a heartbreaking reversal, he thanks the survivors simply for staying alive. A prayer for safety amidst the flames. Sora 3 hopes that her childhood friends, the heroes Yudo and Makoto, will be spared from the war's devastation. Stepping up to lead, she asks to handle the mission with her squad, receiving a stern warning from Ren 2 to stay calm until the target is secured. Facing the bandaged heroes, Sora 3 emphasizes the importance of the task, vowing to make the operation a success. The order is absolute. Kill the user of Ignis Fatuus. But the true horror lies in the identity of the hunters the assassins sent to execute Walm are none other than his own fellow countrymen. The tide of war shifts, but the true challenge remains. While the Christ Empire and its allies have claimed a few early victories, the capture of the Hyserk fort was nothing more than a minor delay. The real-priced impenetrable Sarajevo fort still stands firm, mocking their efforts. As the bearded commander reflects on the state of the campaign, he prepares to reveal a development from yesterday that threatens to change everything. A staggering toll for a single encounter. The commander reveals the grim reality. 102 dead and 117 wounded, all caused by one lone Hyserk soldier. As Sora 3 and the other officers process the sheer scale of the devastation, a frontline chief is called upon to recount the horror. A broken man arrives. The chief from the front lines is brought in as a mere shell of a human, his entire body encased in bandages. Sora 3 looks on with concern, questioning he didn't simply send a written report given his wretched condition. But the chief is determined despite his useless limbs. He insisted on coming personally to testify about the massacre. After a quick, humble apology to Sora 3, the room falls silent as the leadership commands him to begin. A nightmare begins. The chief recalls the allowed assault, where the soldiers charged forward with confidence only to be met by a shout of terror. Sora 3 had dismissed the Ignis Fatuus as a mere fairy tale, but as the bonfire of the underworld erupted, the truth became a lethal reality. By the time they realized the danger, it was already too late. The scale of the slaughter was unimaginable. The chief reveals the grim mathematics of the attack. Total annihilation within 5 meters, and severe life-altering burns for anyone within 15. Even those 20 meters away were left scarred and traumatized. He explains that while soldiers are trained to take cover or hit the ground during magic attacks, such tactics were worthless against this power. Against the blue flames of Ignis Fatuus, there was only one way to survive: run. A legend of destruction has become a gruesome reality. Stunned by the chief's testimony, the officers debate how to counter the devastating power of the Ignis Fatuusum, suggesting sheer numbers, others calling for their best knights. But for the chief, the strategic debate is hollow. He can only think of the men he lost to those merciless flames. The question now is how to force the monster into the open. Stepping forward with unwavering confidence, Sora 3 volunteers herself and her squad to handle the threat, receiving permission though with a stern warning that failure is not an option. The target has been marked. While the enemy leadership plots to erase the Ignis Fatuus from existence, Walm remains in the oppressive silence of the aftermath. Surrounded by the broken bodies of those he slaughtered, he sits hollow and exhausted, the crushing weight of endless war reflected in his murky eyes. The silence of death is broken. Amidst the piles of corpses, Walm slowly stirs from his exhaustion. A surviving soldier wakes in a blind panic, fearing the enemy has returned, but the real terror is already there. Surveying the wasteland he created, Walm lets out a chilling, hollow chuckle, a sudden awakening in a graveyard of soldiers. While one survivor jolts awake from a deep, oblivious slumber, he quickly realizes he is trapped in a nightmare. The bastion has become a scene of absolute carnage, littered with the fallen. And there, leaning against the wall with a hollow gaze, is Walm, watching the survivors panic with chilling detachment. The scent of death lingers in the air, a familiar stench that no longer bothers him. With a cold indifference, Walm takes a quick drink and simply drifts back to sleep among the ruins. The gears of war turn once more. Soren 2 gathers his troops to deliver the orders. Cover Palma's platoon and hold the line. It seems like a simple task, but if the enemy pushes too hard, they have a devastating insurance policy. The terrifying power of Walm's Ignis Fatuus to incinerate everything in their path. The orders are set, and the charge begins. Ryfor quickly assigns duties. Neri takes on the magic share. Luca manages the newbies, and Walm is told to save his strength. With a final roar to break through and flush the enemy out of their holes, the squad surges forward into the fray. The charge erupts into a bloodbath. With a roar of hatred, the enemy soldiers tear through the Hyserk ranks, slaughtering them without mercy. A deadly rain of arrows. While the front lines are a bloodbath, Cian proves her worth, picking off enemies with terrifying accuracy. She may struggle in close quarters, but with a bow in hand, she is unrivaled. Yet for Ellen, the reality of war is far less graceful. The battlefield turns freezing as a sudden blast of ice magic tears through the fray, nearly claiming Ellen in its frozen grip. Thanks to Luca's quick reflexes, Ellen narrowly escapes the frost, though the chilling encounter leaves him shaken. Amidst the chaos, Avon watches with a hollow gaze, wondering how many more times they must repeat this same bloody cycle of defensa theos. He senses that today something is different. Something is wrong. Wom notices a disturbing shift in the enemies. Pavorev and the spellcasters, who usually stay in the rear, are relentlessly storming the slope. Confused by this sudden desperation, he is momentarily lost in thought, only to be sharply reminded by a comrade that daydreaming in the heat of battle is a dangerous habit. Chaos erupts as a violent explosion tears through the ranks, leaving soldiers screaming in terror. Yet, amidst the carnage, Wom remains chillingly calm. As he maneuvers through the blast, he looks upon the enemy with a cold gaze, questioning if they always use their own comrades as mere meat shields, a natural shield against the heat. After walking away from a direct fire attack unscathed, Wom's comrades are amazed by his incredible resilience. But for Wom, the sudden shower of praise is just another exhausting part of the battle. The battle takes a sudden, sharp turn. Just as the dust settles, the enemy cavalry corps charges in, led by a fierce warrior who demands her troops hold the line. Wom realizes too late that the enemy had a hidden ace up their sleeve. With a mocking smile, Ira unleashes a lethal windblade, sending a shockwave of destruction across the battlefield. A sudden twist. Wom is shocked to see the windblade vanish, but the surprise is short-lived. Ira immediately deploys Iron Wall, utilizing defensive magic to aggressively close the gap. Facing the overwhelming power of a real knight, Wom realizes they are dealing with a far more dangerous opponent than expected. Desperation peaks as the soldiers scream for Wom to use the mask. Though he feels a deep reluctance and whispers a sorry to the chaos around him, Wom knows there is no other choice. With a determined gaze, he dons the mask, preparing to unleash the devastating power of Ignis Fatuus. A chilling realization strikes as the mask is revealed. Era recognizes the demon mask and declares that she has finally found him, immediately launching a sudden waterball spell that catches Wom completely off guard. A sudden clash of elements. Era's waterball connects with explosive force, sending Wom crashing backward across the pavement. However, the victory is short-lived as confusion sets in while Wom reels from the blow. Era is left stunned, questioning why she felt the impact and why this fight is defying her expectations. The target is revealed. Era locks onto Wom, declaring this his end and demanding he unleash his demon fire. But Wom, scarred and bloodied, grits his teeth with a fierce resolve he has already died once, and he refuses to let it happen a second time. A flash of steel and a crushing blow. Era doesn't give Wom a moment to breathe, striking with lethal precision to pin him down. Now, you stay put, she declares, intending to end the fight instantly. Wom is left reeling in agony, the sheer force of the attack leaving him breathless and broken. A devastating blow, and the tide turns instantly. Wom lies broken and breathless, the wind knocked out of him by Ira's overwhelming strength. But there is no time to recover as his comrades scream in panic. The arrival of mage soldiers turns a defeat into a potential execution. He is wide open, and the enemy is closing in. Desperation turns into action. As the threat looms, squad leader charges headlong through the ruins, refusing to let Wom perish on this battlefield. A sudden, violent eruption of fire tears through the battlefield, leaving everyone in shock. Even the mage soldiers are stunned by the sheer crushing power of the blast, while a frustrated Era screams for the interference to stop. Amidst the chaos, Wom watches with wide eyes, sensing that something truly massive is about to happen. A sudden surge of power. From the brink of defeat, Wom erupts with a devastating holy strike, incinerating the mage soldiers in a blinding flash of fire. A blinding pillar of fire erupts, tearing through the earth and obliterating everything in its path. With this single devastating strike, Wom completely overwhelms his attackers. A gaze of absolute intensity. As the debris from his devastating blast rains down, Wom's eyes reflect the raw power and desperation of the strike he just unleashed. Before the fire and blood, there was only hunger. A sudden shift in time reveals the bleak reality of Wom's early life, where he was just a boy burdened by the crushing weight of poverty. In a world where the fields could no longer provide, the terrifying threat of starvation was the first war he ever had to fight. A rare glimmer of hope appears as young Wom discovers a patch of berries. But in a world gripped by famine, even this small find is a precious secret reserved only for the child, to ensure he has the strength to keep growing. A glimpse into a lost innocence. Even as a child, Wom carried a burden of maturity that worried his family and his companion. Despite the crushing weight of the famine, a small moment of warmth remains as they share a brief, playful bond. A different kind of emptiness. The scene transitions to the life of Kian, a weary salaryman walking home under the cold city lights. Even amidst the repetitive grind of his corporate life, a lingering feeling haunts him. The sense that he has forgotten something truly important. A miserable existence finally comes to an end. Kian is dead. As he stands before the void, ready to be sent home, he feels no regret, only a quiet indifference to leaving it all behind. The echoes of the past fade. Returning to the brutal reality of the present, Wom lies broken and breathless in the center of the crater he created, staring up at the twin moons in a heavy, suffocating silence, a heavy price for a moment of power. Gasping for air and coughing through the dust, Wom slowly pushes himself up from the wreckage. But as he touches his face, a chilling realization hits him. He can't, his eye has been scorched away by the very magic he unleashed. He understands that while the rising debris shielded his life, his sight was the cost of survival. Disoriented and broken, he can only wonder how long he has been unconscious in this wasteland. A devastating price for a devastating blow. Wom looks out over a wasteland of rubble and corpses, the grim reality of his power laid bare in the silence of the aftermath. A horrifying realization. Looking upon the wreckage, Wom discovers that the bodies, littering the ground, are Hyserk soldiers, dumped here in a mass grave of his own making. The true horror sets in as the faces become familiar. Wom collapses in agony, screaming the names of his fallen comrades Stanfan, Tiberd, and Lenusis. The crushing weight of the tragedy sinks in. In the end, he is left utterly alone in a desolate wasteland of death. A nightmare realized. Amidst the scattered armor and broken blades, the truth becomes unbearable as Wom recognizes Nor and Burrito, realizing that his entire division has been wiped out. The ghosts of the past return to haunt him, as Wom screams in absolute agony. The kind words and stern reminders of his fallen comrades echo in his mind, making the silence of the graveyard even more deafening. The silence of the wasteland is the loudest scream of all. Broken and hollow, Wom collapses amidst the ruins. With one eye blinded and his heart shattered, he stares into the void, a shell of the man he once was. A living ghost in a land of the dead. Wom surveys the ruins of the fortress, where the flags of the Four Nations Alliance now fly over what was once a front line, now turned into a silent graveyard. Looking at the piles of corpses, he is haunted by the realization that he should have been rotting among them. Broken and alone, he is left with one agonizing question. What is he supposed to do now? The horror only deepens. As Wom examines the bodies, he discovers a sickening truth. His comrades weren't just killed. They were blinded and tortured beyond belief. Recalling a grim legend from his brother Hayes about those who wander in eternal darkness, Wom is left shaken. In the face of such senseless cruelty, he is forced to accept the coldest reality of all. This is war. The weight of hypocrisy finally snaps him. As he looks at the tortured remains of his friends, Wom is struck by a horrifying realization. He has no right to demand rationality from a world where he himself has killed without mercy. In a fit of manic laughter and despair, he accepts the cold, indiscriminate truth that in war death makes no exceptions for any. In the heart of the carnage, a cold truth finally sinks in. It's kill or be killed. But as Wom stands amidst the ruins, he isn't alone. Enemy soldiers, scouring the graveyard for any remaining survivors, spot a flicker of movement. Mistaking him for a stubborn undead soldier the disposal squad missed, they move in to finish the job quickly. A disposable life in a disposable war. While the enemy soldiers bicker over whether to waste a blade on a maggot-filled corpse or simply walk away, Wom remains motionless. In the silence of his mind, the hollow echoes of loyalty, duty, and revenge swirl around him, leaving only one haunting question. What do you wish for? A haunting silhouette against the pale moon. What do you wish for with those murky eyes? Stripped of his humanity and broken by loss, Wom now stands as a hollow vessel of survival in a world of endless slaughter. A sudden strike from the depths of despair. Thinking him a broken shell, the enemy soldiers move in to deliver a mercy kill. But just as they prepare to end his life, Wom erupts in a blur of lethal precision, turning the hunter into the prey in a single, shocking heartbeat. From prey to predator in a heartbeat, with a sudden explosive burst of violence, Wom tears through the unsuspecting soldiers. As one is sent flying by the force of the blow, the others are paralyzed by a chilling realization. The corpse they tried to dispose of is very much alive, and he has become a living nightmare. A single blinding flash of steel, and it's over in one fluid motion. Wom transforms from a perceived corpse into a dealer of death, cleanly severing the soldier's head. As the body collapses and the head rolls away, Wom remains motionless, his eyes devoid of emotion, a terrifying reflection of the monster war has created. The predator awakens. With a guttural roar, Wom lunges forward, his eyes reflecting a terrifying manic intensity. The enemy soldier's scream of defiance is cut short as a single lethal blade flash severs his head from his shoulders, leaving only a gruesome silence in its wake. Pure, unfiltered carnage. In a flash of steel and blood, Wom tears through his enemies, transforming the battlefield into a slaughterhouse. Those who saw him as a mere corpse now find themselves becoming one. A haunting silence falls over the battlefield. Wom looks upon the corpses, wondering if his fire can guide these lost souls through the darkness of the underworld. But the moment of reflection is brief. With a chilling smile, he brushes off the horror and prepares to move on. As he rejoins his companions, a grim warning echoes. The road ahead is paved with even more fire. A haunting silhouette of death. Standing amidst the ruins and the fallen, Wom becomes a beacon of dark fire in a world of ash. Let's make them big, he declares. As the path ahead promises only more bloodshed, a cold truth lingers over the battlefield. As Wom walks away from the ruins, he reflects on the fragility of life in a world where death is the only certainty. He knows all too well that in this war, you are only one heartbeat from becoming another nameless corpse, a cold truth etched in blood. As Wom walks through the wreckage of the battlefield, he leaves behind a trail of death, reminding us that in this world, survival is the only thing that matters. You should know it too. A sudden shift in perspective brings us to the 6th English campment. Haunted by whispers of death, Makoto is jolted awake by the sounds of chaos. The camp is under attack, and with Akima Yudo already fallen, Makoto's only thought is the safety of Sugimoto Ayane and Johanna, a nightmare turned into a living hell. Makoto looks on in shock, realizing that a massive portion of the 6th encampment has already been engulfed in flames. A chilling realization hits. Though he lacks the full details of the attack, Makoto recognizes the devastating nature of the blaze. These are the flames of the Ignis Fatuus user. A ghost from the past, Makoto is paralyzed by a horrifying thought: the flames consuming the camp are far too familiar. He is certain that he killed the man responsible, yet the evidence of the Ignis Fatuus is undeniable. Shaking off his disbelief, he sprints through the ruins, desperate to reach Ayane and Johanna before the fire claims them too. A glimpse into the cold politics of war. As the Allied forces prepare a massive final empire, the atmosphere is thick with rivalry. While the three great heroes, as the pride of Christ, the nation of Farius demands the right to lead the charge to reclaim their lost lands. Amidst the tension, Sora 3 suggests a simple draw of lots to decide the spearhead, only to be swiftly shut down for her indiscretion. In this race for glory, the right to lead is not about strategy, but about who can curry the most favor for the future. A sudden shift in atmosphere. Away from the noise of war and politics, we find 3 in a moment of fragile peace. As she is served a warm cup of tea, a heavy silence hangs over her, while another woman watches her with a sharp, questioning gaze. The sudden roar of battle shatters the council's composure. While some dismiss the noise as mere spies, a chilling magical presence fills the air, signaling a far greater threat. Before they can even react, a panicked soldier bursts in with the grim news: the enemy has attacked, and they've already breached the 3rd circle. A single man is tearing through their defenses. Panic erupts in the council as a messenger delivers the unthinkable news. The attacker is just one soldier, the very man they were supposed to have killed. Johanna's face pales in shock as the truth hits her: the terrifying Ignis Fatuus user has returned. The warning comes a second too late. With a devastating burst of power, the Ignis Fatuus user tears through the council's defenses, plunging the leadership into absolute chaos. The inferno finally fades, leaving behind a wasteland of ash and silence. Amidst the ruins, a few soldiers scramble to save the handful of survivors, their gratitude overshadowed by the sheer scale of the loss. The fire is dying, but the horror of the attack is only just beginning to sink in. A whirlwind of steel and blood. As the flames subside, Wom strikes with cold, lethal precision, silencing the screams of the council members. Amidst the carnage, Sora 3 watches in shock, questioning her own capabilities against such a terrifying force. A living nightmare. Paralyzed by fear, a survivor stares at the charred, grotesque remains of a comrade, overwhelmed by the sheer destructive power of the attack. A sudden, crushing strike. As Wom continues his ruthless slaughter, a witness is left breathless with terror, realizing that even with broken fingers, the soldier's strength is absolutely monstrous. No one is safe from his wrath. With a single explosive strike, Wom obliterates the woman's defenses, sending her crashing back in a burst of absolute violence. A force of nature unleashed. Wom's sheer tenacity and lethal precision leave his enemies in absolute despair. As he unleashes the devastating Anabai without restraint, Rentu can only watch in horror, realizing that fighting back is now utterly futile. The Ligurian battalion has been completely destroyed. The carnage doesn't end with the battalion. In a clash of raw hatred, Wom finds himself impaled, yet he only screams in rage, calling the use of a spear in a duel an absolute disgrace. The clash reaches a fever pitch as Wom relentlessly drives his attack into RN2. But amidst the screams and the carnage, the true horror sinks in for those left behind. A lone survivor sits in stunned silence, realizing that all her past experiences with war were nothing compared to this, where 20 lives were extinguished in a matter of minutes. A nightmare in a tent. While Wom and Ren 2 clash in a whirlwind of violence, a devastated survivor can only stare in disbelief, wondering how their numbers dwindled to a mere 5 in a matter of minutes. A sudden nightmare. Just as the survivor processes the horrific loss of her comrades, Wom appears before her like a demon, Paralyzed by fear and sudden regret, she can only scream as she stares into the cold, murderous eyes of the man who erased her entire unit. A cold end for the last one left. Wom looms over the lone survivor, his presence as suffocating as the carnage he left behind. Cowering against the stone in absolute terror, she is met with a chilling finality. Killed you, a gaze that freezes the soul. Paralyzed by a fear she cannot describe, the survivor looks up at Wom, seeing him no longer as a man, but as a skeletal demonth living embodiment of the slaughter that just erased her entire world. A flicker of resolve amidst the ruins, as she gazes up at the towering, monstrous presence of Wom. The survivor's mind spirals torn between the cold justifications of the state and the sheer, crushing horror of the reality before her. A haunting silence falls over the ruins. As the smoke clears, the survivors are left in shock, realizing that the monster who just erased their comrades was once a man. With a final, devastating spark of ignis fatuus, Wom has vanished, leaving behind only wreckage and a chilling question. What did the world do to push him to this point? The dust settles, but the terror remains. As the few remaining survivors pick themselves up from the wreckage, the weight of their annihilation sinks in. Lady Myard and her comrades are left with a chilling realization. They completely underestimated Wom, a man who has become a monster more dangerous than even the three great heroes. A crushing weight of self-hatred. Despite the devastation he is capable of, Wom is haunted by a lingering feeling of inadequacy. As he dwells on his own perceived uselessness, the scene shifts to the cold, silent walls of a fortress. A new shadow looms over the conflict. Within a distant fortress, a seasoned commander lounges in his chair, smoking a cigar as he processes the news of the massacre. He is genuinely baffled, unable to comprehend how the Ligurian battalion could be completely wiped out, a defeat that defies everything he knows about war. However, his shock quickly turns to cold pragmatism, acknowledging that the dead cannot be brought back. He decides they must now use whatever pieces remain to pave their way forward. When direct force is no longer an option, the game changes. Lord Farius Winston weighs his remaining choices, dismissing sabotage and suicide squads as too risky or ineffective. With the success rate of other plans remaining low, he settles on a more ruthless alternative. His new objective is clear: turn the land of the former Maillard into a scorched earth battlefield, utilizing delay tactics to make the enemy bleed out within the walls of the fortress. A moment of quiet dread is shattered by sudden chaos. As Lord Farius Winston worries about being stripped of his position by the Parliament, the very walls of his fortress begin to tremble. With screams erupting and panic spreading among his men, the god of war rushes out to face whatever horror has just arrived at his doorstep. The nightmare has arrived at the gates. Wom descends upon the fortress, bringing the same devastating blue flames that annihilated the Ligurian battalion. As the ignis fatuus erupts, the soldiers are gripped by pure terror, realizing that the monster they feared has finally found them. Desperation takes hold as the defenders scramble to activate every trap in a last-ditch effort to survive. But for Wom, their frantic movements are nothing more than a joke. With a cold reminder that time is everything, he turns their military discipline into a nightmare, leaving the soldiers with only one instinct left: to run for their lives. Chaos erupts as the fortress turns into a living hell. The storehouse is already lost to the fire of the underworld, and desperate soldiers scramble with buckets of water, terrified that the blaze will reach the oil barrels. Amidst the smoke and screams, the wounded are dragged away as the inferno only grows stronger by the minute. A momentary breath of air, exhausted and bloodstained, Wom finds a quiet spot to regroup, thinking he's finally found a safe haven. But in this hellscape, peace is a lethal illusion. Before he can even process his surroundings, a hidden blade tears through him, leaving him with a grim, familiar realization. In this war, there is no such thing as a safe place, a hollow victory. Amidst the ruins he created, Wom is haunted by the goals he failed to achieve. He couldn't kill the woman. He was beaten by an old man, and the three heroes remain elusive. Questioning the very point of his revenge, he realizes that survival is the only priority now. With a grim resolve, he prepares to leave the carnage behind and find a way out. Chaos reigns as the fortress is consumed by fire, with desperate soldiers hunting for the mysterious user of the ignis fatuus. But in the shadows of the devastation, Wom finds a fallen soldier. In a rare moment of mercy amidst the slaughter, he reaches out to the wounded man, urging him to stand and flee before the flames claim him too. A flicker of humanity amidst the carnage. As Wom guides the wounded soldier away from the inferno, the man reveals a surprising truth: Wom has been his savior countless times before. Despite the soldier's battered state and broken armor, Wom offers a blunt but reassuring word, leading him towards safety while the fortress burns behind them. A facade of mercy. While Wom helps the wounded soldier toward the sick bay, his mind is far from compassionate. He admits to himself that he'd rather have killed the man, but sees a better opportunity, using the casualty as a ticket to blend in with the patients as the soldier reflects on the night's nightmare. Wom's cold response echoes the darkness now residing in his eyes. The facade of the savior continues. Wom arrives at the sickbay, urgently calling for the healer hero to treat the wounded man. Once the soldier is safely in the hands of the medical staff, Wom's goal is achieved is now inside the facility, blending in perfectly with the chaos. A dangerous encounter in the House of Healing. Having successfully blended in as a casualty, Wom finds himself under the care of Sugimoto Ayanion of the legendary Three Heroes. As she meticulously assesses his broken ribs and lacerations, Wom is struck by a chilling realization. The rumors were true, and the heroes are indeed here, a miracle of healing, or a terrifying display of power. As Sugimoto Ayane begins her work, Wom is left speechless by the sheer intensity of her magic. The speed of regeneration is unlike anything he has ever witnessed, leaving him with a grim realization. With healers of this caliber, the enemy army can afford to be reckless, pushing their soldiers to the absolute limit in every single battle. A cold calculation. Wom recognizes that Ayane's immense healing power makes her a critical obstacle to both Hyserk and the Empyrone that must eventually be dealt with. Though he considers drawing his sword, he knows the risk of immediate retaliation is too high. As she continues her treatment, he thinks with dark irony that if the roles were reversed, he wouldn't feel any obligation to return the favor, a mask of gratitude for a hidden agenda. With his wounds gone, Wom showers Sugimoto Ayane with praise, playing the part of the thankful patient to perfection. But as soon as she turns away, the facade drops, his mind is already on the next move, blending into the crowd of the wounded to vanish into the shadows of the fortress. Just when he thought he could slip away unnoticed, fate throws a curveball. Wom freezes in shock as he spots a high-ranking figure appearing right in his path. God damn it, can't he just get a break for once? Just great. The only enemy capable of recognizing him by face is now blocking the only exit. With his back against the wall and no other options left, Wom decides to take the gamble. He has to get through. A dangerous game of hide-and-seek. Wom attempts to make his exit, only to find himself face-to-face. With Makoto, the tension spikes, as the hero casually remarks on how relieved he is that the Ignis Fatuus guy isn't anywhere near them, completely unaware that the man he's talking about is standing right in front of him. A dangerous game of hide-and-seek in plain sight. As Sora 3 laments her carelessness and Makoto tries to soothe her, Wom holds his breath, praying they remain oblivious to the predator standing right beside them. Just keep talking, he urges internally, and completely ignore me. A narrow escape from the brink of discovery. While Sora 3 wonders how the badly injured Ignis Fatuus user is still alive and managed to vanish into the darkness, Wom is barely holding it together. Sweating and strained, he pushes himself forward, knowing he is almost clear of the danger. Just when he thought he was in the clear, a cold voice stops Wom in his tracks. Sora 3 singles him out, admitting that while she doesn't know any Felius soldiers, there is something hauntingly familiar about him, leaving Wom frozen in panic. A dangerous game of wits. To shake off Johanna's suspicion, Wom quickly spins a lie, claiming they must have crossed paths during the chaos of the attack. He even brushes off his scarred eye as a casualty of enemy magic, playing the part of a wounded soldier to perfection. With a polite bow and a few flattering words about her status as a knight, he makes his escape before the facade can crumble. Freedom is finally within reach. With a steady breath, Wom pushes toward the exit, reminding himself to stay calm. As he steps out, he finds the camp in absolute turmoil. Hyserk soldiers have broken through the perimeter, and the three heroes are on the move for Wom. This chaos is the perfect cover to vanish unnoticed. The enemy's cunning strike. Stunned by the sudden collapse of their perimeter, Sora 3 demands to know how the front was breached so quickly. But the answer is far more terrifying. Hyserk soldiers didn't break the front at all. Instead, they surged from hidden tunnels, using the raging fires as a shroud to infiltrate the heart of the camp. The breach is worse than they imagined. Stunned that underground mining tunnels still exist in the Sixth Circle, Johanna listens as soldiers report a swelling enemy force and a cavalry assault. Realizing the camp is being overrun, she makes a decisive call. She will lead the three heroes to the source and eradicate the tunnels at their root. The three heroes burst forward with overwhelming force, clearing a path as they rush toward Commander Gran. For Wom, this sudden eruption of chaos is the perfect cover, his single best chance to slip away unnoticed. Yet, as he watches them tear through the ranks, he realizes that their reckless speed will inevitably leave a trail of casualties among the soldiers they trample. The weight of the past strikes back. Wom tries to convince himself that Hez fulfilled his duty and deserves to leave. But a haunting voice from him asks if Hez really okay with letting more people die. It's a cruel reminder that for a man like him, survival always comes with a heavy psychological price. The ghosts of the past refuse to stay silent. Driven by a sudden, overwhelming guilt, Wom throws himself back into the slaughter, lunging forward with a desperate resolve to stop the carnage before more lives are needlessly lost. A sudden violent intervention. Wom slams into the fray, commanding everyone to stay put with a chilling threat. As the three heroes reel from the impact, they are left stunned by his audacity and the realization that they are facing a user of the dreaded Ignis Fatuus. A cold, murderous determination settles in Wom's eyes. To ensure the safety of the remaining soldiers, he makes a ruthless declaration. He is taking the healer and every wounded person here as hostages. A desperate gamble. Wom stands as the sole obstacle between the three heroes and their objective, blocking their only way out. While Sugimoto Ayane feels the pressure to end the confrontation quickly, Wom masks his own internal panic with a chillingly calm request for them to stay put. With the enemy closing in on the sixth circle, the tension reaches a breaking point as the heroes realize Wom knows exactly how to manipulate the situation. A deadly game of chicken. Wom's hollow, murky eyes leave the heroes unable to read his next move, creating a psychological wall as thick as his physical one. While the heroes shout that He's a coward and dismiss the threat of his demon fire, Wom is fighting a silent battle of his own, dreading the possibility of harming the medics who saved him. It's a desperate race against time, and neither side is willing to blink first. A cruel reminder of mortality. Wom points out that while the heroes might be strong enough to withstand his flames, the broken soldiers around them are not. When Sugimoto Ayane screams that he is inhuman, Wom only smiles, throwing the accusation right back in her face. Because in this war, they are all monsters. The tension finally snaps. Determined to protect his comrade, Makoto lunges forward, swearing that he won't allow Wom's demon fire to take Ayan hostage. But Wom remains chillingly calm. With a simple AC, he unleashes the devastating power of Ignis Fatuus, striking with a violent intensity that leaves the heroes completely blindsided. A sudden interruption. Ayane steps into the chaos, completely unaware of the tension. But Wom's murky eyes see her for what she truly is. A threat that must be dealt with. A living hell erupts as Wom's flames consume everything in their path. Amidst the agonizing screams of the dying, he stands unmoved. His heart is cold as his eyes are murky. With a chilling lack of empathy, he only wonders why they won't just die already. The aftermath is a scene of pure carnage. Amidst the screams of the maimed and the shock of the survivors, Wom stands unmoved, offering a chilling ultimatum: surrender, and hell make their end quick. But Sugimoto Ayane refuses to bow. Her defiance only brings out a darker, more predatory side of the man who has long since abandoned his humanity. A thunderous crash shatters the standoff. Out of nowhere, Theo2 bursts through the structures with overwhelming force, leaving the heroes in a state of shock. With the sudden arrival of backup, the battlefield dynamic shifts in an instant. A total powerhouse enters the fray. With one crushing blow, Theo2 sends Wom flying, instantly shifting the tide of the confrontation. A desperate command in the heat of battle. Theo2 leaves no room for argument, ordering Johanna to take the survivors and flee immediately, though she hesitates. Gran's resolve is to absolute mind and face the onslaught alone to ensure their escape. A clash of monsters. Surprised that his attack didn't finish the job, Commander Gran acknowledges Wom's terrifying adaptability. But as Wom glares with a murderous intent to hunt the fleeing heroes, Gran makes one thing clear. He is the wall that Wom will not pass. A clash of titans. Wom finds himself facing a wall of pure power as CL2 strikes with devastating force. Recognizing the commander's brute strength reminiscent of Captain Due, Wom realizes he can't win with power alone. To survive this onslaught, he decides to shift his tactics and switch up his combat style. A desperate gamble fails. Just as Wom tries to adapt, CL2 seizes him in a crushing grip. Paralyzed by the commander's sheer power, Wom is left completely helpless before being violently slammed back into the dirt. A brutal impact. CL2 slams Wom into the dirt with overwhelming force, but the protagonist refuses to stay down. With a quick, cunning movement, Wom slips from the commander's grasp, leaving CL2 momentarily stunned by his resilience. A monster in armor. Wom quickly realizes that CL2 isn't just a powerhouse, she's a tactical genius with flawless swordsmanship and an iron grip. Frustrated and pushed to his limit, Wom begins to piece together the commander's ruthless patterns, wondering if those earlier strikes at the wounded were no accident. A dangerous realization strikes. Wom recognizes the man before him as the commander, but his focus quickly shifts to the surrounding area. The wounded survivors of Ignis Fatuus, including the medics who saved him, are all gathered right here. He cannot simply unleash his flames without risking their lives, forcing him to face this monster while holding back his most devastating weapon. A desperate gamble. Refusing to risk the lives of the wounded with his flames, Wom throws himself into a flurry of rapid strikes. But CL2 is a wall of steel, effortlessly reading his movements and dismissing the attacks as too shallow. A sudden, brutal turn. CL2's overwhelming strike misses its mark, but the collateral damage is horrific as a nearby soldier's hands are sliced clean off in a spray of blood. While Wom watches in absolute horror, the commander offers a cold, casual apology for the carnage. cold as ice. CL2 shuts down the screaming soldier's agony with a chilling command for silence, viewing the man's pain as nothing more than a distraction from his hunt for the Ignis Fatuus user. With a monstrous lack of empathy, he dismisses the horror by claiming the wounds can simply be healed by Ayana-sama, leaving Walm horrified by the commander's absolute indifference to human suffering. Absolute silence is the only thing the commander demands. To CL2, the screams of the wounded are nothing more than a nuisance that might dull his blade. With a chilling gaze, he warns them that not a single word must escape their mouths as he turns his full lethal attention toward Walm. A brutal strike! CL2 catches Walm off guard, sending him crashing to the ground. As Walm lies wounded, the commander sneers at his hesitation, mocking the Ignis Fatuus user for letting a shred of conscience interfere with his survival to CL2. This moral conflict is nothing more than a fatal flaw in an unbalanced mind. A crushing blow. CL2 doesn't just break Walm's body, but his spirit, as he delivers a cold lesson on the reality of war. To the commander, isn't about empathy, it's about the absolute mastery of place and men. Empathy is a death sentence on the battlefield. CL2 delivers a final crushing blow, telling Walm to curse his own kindness. As Walm collapses in agony, the commander makes it clear that in this world, mercy is nothing more than a fatal flaw. No more mercy, no more hesitation. CL2 delivers a final gruesome strike, ensuring Walm stays dead this time. Even in victory, he can't help but mock Walm's reluctance to use Ignis Fatuus, finding a sadistic pleasure in how easily he crushed a man who refused to abandon his humanity. A fatal realization. Walm discovers he's been baited into a trap, but there is no escape. CL2 seizes the moment to deliver a final merciless blow, declaring that it's already too late. The trap snaps shut. Walm's realization comes a second too late as CL2's blade tears through him with merciless precision, leaving the broken soldier to scream in absolute agony, a blur of absolute speed. The impact is devastating, leaving nothing but rubble in its wake. The observing commander is left in total shock, unable to even track the movement. One moment the strike comes from behind, and the next, CL2 has already vanished from sight. A flash of steel, and it's over. CL2 strikes with such impossible speed that the observing commander can barely comprehend what happened. As the blade pierces through him, Walm is hit with a horrifying realization. Every single move he made was nothing more than a piece in CL2's cruel trap. The cruelty doesn't end with the blade. CL2 mocks Walm, pointing out how the blood of bystanders and the screams of the injured became mere chains that bound him with a chills. He asks the ultimate question. Has Walm already grown used to this nightmare? The psychological torture reaches its peak. CL2 sneers, claiming that the imbalance in Walm's mind is the true cause of his failure. But even as he is crushed, Walm finds one last spark of defiance, screaming his intent to stop this monster right here, right now. The tables have turned. In a sudden burst of desperation, Walm catches CL2 completely off guard, leaving the commander in utter shock. With a manic resolve and eyes full of fury, Walm unleashes his full power, vowing to burn his enemy to a crisp with everything he has left. The tables have turned. Caught completely off guard, CL2 is forced to scramble for a defense, but Walm isn't letting up. Even as a shield is raised to block the onslaught, Walm pushes forward with relentless determination, realizing he can still strike through the defense to incinerate his opponent. The tide finally turns. Walm pushes CL2 to the limit, forcing the arrogant commander to concede the field. But as the dust settles and Walm gasps for air, the victory feels hollow. Looking at his enemy, Walm's murky eyes harden with a single cold objective. This man must be killed, no matter the cost. The battle's end brings no peace, only new desperation. One of the heroes screams in agony, fighting against Johanna, Hold in a frantic attempt to rescue Ayan from the ruins. But, as the group begins to withdraw, a cold voice cuts through the air. Sugimoto Ayane appears, completely unscathed and devoid of pity, mocking the soldiers who have been abandoned to their fate. A desperate plea for mercy, surrounded by a wall of spears, a bloodied and exhausted Walm frantically tries to explain himself, revealing that his enemy armor was merely a disguise. He clings to the hope of survival, citing his place in the Ligurian battalion under Captain Dewey. Just as the situation looks grim, a soldier notices his signature red scarf, finally recognizing the broken warrior as the hero they were sent to aid. A glimmer of hope amidst the ruins. Walm reports the fall of the Sixth Circle to the High Cirque forces, admitting they lack a clear plan moving forward. Despite the loss, the soldiers are energized by the news that one of the great heroes is among the wounded, promising a potential turning point. Exhausted and battered, Walm tries to find a moment of peace with a cigarette, only to realize he's completely out of fuel. A rare moment of silence finally falls over the battlefield. Exhausted and completely drained of mana, Walm leans back to enjoy a cigarette, finding a brief sanctuary in the company of a fellow soldier who admires his Ignis Fatuus. For now, the horrors of war can wait. The tides of war shift in a single night. While an aide frantically urges him to move, Unifor remains unfazed, lounging in comfort as he absorbs the news. The four-country alliance is crumbling, and the legendary heroes have been dismantled too, defeated by the mysterious Ignis Fatuus user, and captured for Hugo. This chaos isn't a tragedy, it's the perfect stage for him to finally shine, waking up to a shifted tide of war. After slipping into unconsciousness for an entire day, Walm awakens within the walls of Sarajevo Fortress. He quickly learns that the Hysark army has successfully retaken the fortress and the external rings, forcing the battered four-country alliance to retreat. Though a victory for his side, the strategic gains have vanished, leaving both armies right back where they started. A hard-won victory, but at what cost? As the soldier credits Walm's efforts for retaking the fortress, Walm can only stare blankly into his cup. In the heat of the battle, he had reached a point where death seemed irrelevant. Yet as he recovers, he realizes that some primal part of him simply refused to let go. The weight of victory is heavy when you're the only one left to carry it. Haunted by the thought that he is the sole survivor, Walm remains lost in his own head. A soldier arrives to inform him that Lord Gerald requires his presence immediately. But Walm isn't in any rush. He asks for a few more refills, clinging to a final moment of quiet before returning to the demands of the war. A moment of leisure shadowed by sudden cruelty. The officer tells Walm not to worry about the timing, as the report isn't due until tomorrow. But elsewhere, the true nature of power is revealed as a man executes a soldier with a twisted, chilling sense of admiration, a chilling ultimatum. The commander makes it clear to Sugimoto Ayane that a prisoner of war with no use is nothing more than a burden. He demands that she use her skills to treat the Hysark wounded. But when she refuses, he provides a gruesome demonstration. With a single cold strike, he executes a man right before her eyes, warning her that those who aren't useful are simply removed from the numbers. A cold lesson in survival. The commander isn't finished. He turns his attention to Ayane's assistant, making it clear that she is just as disposable as the prisoner he just slaughtered. Unable to bear the thought of her companion meeting the same fate, Ayane's resolve finally shatters. She desperately agrees to help, giving the commander exactly what he wanted. Humanity is a luxury the battlefield cannot afford. Broken and disgusted, Ayane asks the commander how he can still call himself human after his atrocities. His answer is chillingly simple: in war, nothing is human. Their exchange is cut short by the arrival of Ivan, who enters with exuberant praise, hailing the commander's ruthless success as legendary within the army. Praise feels like a burden when you're the only one left. Haunted by the massacre of his battalion, Walm dismisses his survival as mere luck, unable to reconcile his safety with the deaths of his comrades. But Ivan sees it differently. While acknowledging the devastating loss of the Liguria battalion and Duweiss division, he emphasizes that Walm chose to fight rather than flee. For that resolve, Ivan declares that Walm must be rewarded, a sudden promotion for a broken soldier. Ivan rewards Walm with the honorary title of Knight, a prestigious badge that, while not an official rank, carries significant weight in Hysark. With the council seeking a new national hero to inspire the people, Ivan declares this the first step on Walm's path to becoming a war god, a new look for a new rank. Ivan provides Walm with a sleek black outfit and a special magic pouch, a hand-me-down that can carry far more than a standard bag while remaining light as a feather. Deeply touched by the gesture, Walm vows to put the gift to good use. But Ivan has one more thing on his mind: Walm's snapped sword, a fitting weapon for a new knight. Ivan presents Walm with a prestigious sword from the Hysark Empire, a rare honor reserved for those who have truly distinguished themselves in battle. Stunned by the quality of the blade, Walm can only stare in amazement. A promotion brings a new, unexpected assignment. Ivan reveals that Walm will now serve under his direct command for a critical mission, keeping a close eye on a very important individual. The target of his protection is none other than Ayane Sugimoto, one of the legendary three heroes of Christ. A tense first meeting. Walm and his team are introduced to Ayane Sugimoto, tasked with both protecting and monitoring her. While the group, including the healer in Threeries, presents a professional front, Walm is internally spiraling, haunted by the fact that he has killed aimlessly and hurt Ayane's own childhood friends. He finds her eerie calmness deeply unsettling. A fragile agreement is reached. While Ayane accepts the terms of her monitoring, the air remains thick with unspoken tension. As they witness the miraculous recovery of the wounded, Walm is left in a state of quiet contemplation, his spirit still craving the chaos of the battlefield over this unsettling peace. A strange bond forms over the most unexpected things. Milo is completely intimidated by Walm's status as a knight and his terrifying Ignis Fatuus ability, insisting just an errand boy with no real combat experience. Walm tries to keep things casual, but the conversation takes a bizarre turn when Milo reveals that thanks to his poison resistance, he actually finds poison to be tasty, leaving Walm completely bewildered. The power to save lives can be just as overwhelming as the power to take them. Walm and Milo watch in awe as restoration magic brings half-dead patients back from the brink, one by one. They note that while the magic is incredible, the seamless partnership between the healer and her assistant Mayasan ensures that not even a single scar remains a level of perfection that feels almost scarier than any offensive spell. A week later, the heavy air of death has completely vanished. The medical ward is now alive with cheers as recovered patients shower Ayan and Maya with gifts and heartfelt thanks. Watching from the sidelines, Wam notes how much lighter the atmosphere has become just 7 days ago. Every single person here was on their deathbed. Seeing the miracle of their recovery, a small, rare smile touches his lips. A sudden accident brings a new patient to the ward. A soldier, having fallen from the ramparts, is rushed to the table where Ayani and Maya spring into action. Despite the agonizing process, the restoration magic works its miracle in less than 5 minutes. Watching the man's recovery, Walm remains stunned by the sheer efficiency of the healing. A strange tension lingers. While most patients find peace and relief in the medical ward, Walm remains on edge, his fist clenched tight in a grip that refuses to let go. Chaos erupts in an instant. A hitman blitzes the room with terrifying speed, snatching Ayan before anyone can react. Watch out, Milces. But the attacker's acceleration was too fast. Ayan is caught in the grip of a sudden, violent ambush. A brutal strike in the heart of Sanctuary. The hitman slams Ayan to the floor with terrifying speed, pinning her down in an instant. With a sadistic smirk, he mocks the timing of his assault, noting that it comes right after the patients had been healed. Nearby, the screams of wounded soldiers echo through the ward as the piece is violently torn apart. A lethal revelation. As Ayan lies pinned and helpless, the hitman reveals his true weapon, poisoned darts. Milo screams in horror, realizing the deadly threat now looming over the hero. In a flash, the tables are turned. The hitman is sent flying, his deadly darts scattered across the room. As the witnesses stare in disbelief at the blade that struck him, a memory resurfaces of the sword's creation, a masterpiece forged from dragonfire ore and enchanted silver, designed to amplify and unleash a devastating variety of magic attacks. A weapon forged for absolute destruction. This blade is more than just steel and silver. It is the key to unleashing Walm's terrifying power, commanding him to dance with the flames of the Ignis Fatuus on the battlefield. One swift strike was all it took. With cold efficiency, Walm slams the hitman to the floor, pinning him down before he can even react. He doesn't just want the threat, Gunny wants answers. Ordering the assassin to be tied and gagged, Walm ensures the man cannot bite off his own tongue to escape the coming interrogation. A bitter truth emerges from the silence of death. The hitman escapes interrogation by taking his own life, with a poison capsule hidden in his molars. As Ayani is comforted, the medic delivers a chilling reminder. In a world of endless slaughter, the act of healing only sends more killers back to the front, making even the medics complicit in the murder. With the atmosphere heavy and the grim reality laid bare, Walm abruptly cancels the day's treatment and leads them away. A brief moment of peace follows the storm. Walm ensures Ayane and Mayasan are fed, leading to a surprisingly normal conversation about age and the rules of drinking. As he shares some cheese from his gear, the tension of war momentarily fades, replaced by the simple comfort of a meal, a small mercy in a heartless war. Walm tries to ease the tension by offering mead and promising to provide for Ayane and Mayasan. Despite their status as prisoners, while Ayane appreciates the food, the mood shifts instantly when Mayasan calls him a hypocrite, reminding him that he is the very reason they are in this predicament. The sudden realization leaves Ayane stunned and speechless. A failed mission and a growing sense of dread. As the news of the unsuccessful assassination reaches the enemy command, Milo reflects on the loss of their agent and warns that they are on a certain path to defeat. A ruthless solution is proposed to break the stalemate, to evict the Hysark army from Sarajevo fortress. Milo suggests burning the territories of Myard, intentionally driving displaced magic beasts toward the enemy. She is horrified by the cold calculation and the inevitable civilian casualties, but her pleas fall on deaf ears. In a swift and heartless vote, the kingdoms of Phelius and Christ agree to the plan, sealing a grim fate for the people of Myard. Meanwhile, in the great magical territory, a new struggle unfolds. A woman named Rin4 has just saved a group of survivors from a towering monster, calmly stating that her actions are all for the sake of Myard. But as she stands before the creature, a grim omen lingers. A small overlooked seed can grow into a catastrophic problem, a haunting echo from the past. As Rinfer stands in the present, a sudden memory surfaces a glimpse of her beloved mother, the one person who was her entire reason for living. But the warmth of the memory quickly dissolves into a nightmare, replaced by the screams of a terrified child and the crushing realization that death was coming for them all. A nightmare from the past unfolds. In a village once part of the Merd Kingdom, the landscape has been transformed into a graveyard of impaled corpses and prowling monsters. Amidst the chaos and screams of terror, a young Rinfor reaches out in desperation, her voice breaking as she cries for her mother. A nightmare comes to life. Alone and defenseless amidst the ruins of her home, young Leithia is suddenly confronted by a towering, grotesque monster, leaving her paralyzed in absolute terror. A nightmare turned into a living hell. The monster's grip is inescapable as young Leithia is pinned to the ground. In a state of pure agony and terror, she screams for her mother, her voice echoing through the chaos of the massacre. A catastrophe of unprecedented scale unfolds. At the Sarajevo fortress, the news is devastating. Gontria Mariburg has fallen, and hordes of monsters numbering in the tens of thousands are ravaging the regions. Lord Berger can only watch in horror as reports of mass casualties and retreating forces flood in, signaling a total collapse of the front lines. A nightmare returns. Slamming his fist in grim realization, Lord Berger recognizes the chaos for what it truly is, the Great Rampage. Having witnessed such horror during the High-Cirque expansion, he knows all too well the devastation these monsters bring, a nightmare reborn. Lord Berger reveals the terrifying truth. When a demon nest is damaged, the creatures enter a mindless frenzy, reducing everything in their path to ash. While he once witnessed a smaller version of this horror that claimed 10,000 lives, he realizes the current scale is far worse. Accepting a calculated move, he believes the Four triggered this rampage in the largest demon territory to stall High-Cirque's advance. The cost of survival is total abandonment. Faced with an unprecedented monster horde, Lord Berger makes the crushing decision to abandon Sarajevo Fortress. While his soldiers are horrified to throw away the land they bled for, Berger warns that the threat is too grave and the inland regions are now at risk. To save the imperial city and ensure the survival of the High-Cirque Empire, they must retreat and hold the line at all costs. In this twisted war, there are no winnersonly losers. As the retreat begins along the southwest main road, the horrifying reality sinks in for the survivors. A woman from the Mord Kingdom collapses in despair, screaming against the unfairness of a world that has stripped them of everything, leaving them as nothing more than refugees in a land consumed by madness. A soul shattered by guilt, Leithia collapses into a void of self-hatred, screaming in agony as she blames herself for the unfolding tragedy. But the nightmare doesn't stop with her. The monster horde has now reached the royal capital of Rirantho Castle, where the screams of the terrified echo through the streets, and Nico 5 can only watch in horror as the world falls apart. The cold numbers of war have finally turned into a bloody reality. King Farius watches in despair as his people are slaughtered, realizing that the reports he once reviewed were actually lives being extinguished. But the horror is only beginning. The strategists who triggered this monster surge now realize their gamble failed. The horde didn't just target High-Cirque, it succeeded too well in destroying everything in its path. The crown falls as the nightmare begins. King Farius watches in absolute horror as his capital is torn apart, realizing too late that his thirst for revenge against High-Cirque blinded him to the true nature of the Great Rampage. As the Felius Kingdom is erased from the map and transformed into his wasteland of demon territory, the Broken King accepts his grim fatito, become just another mindless undead in the ruins of his own failure, a final manic scream of hatred. As the Felius Kingdom falls and the Four-Nation Alliance collapses into ruin, King Farius embraces the darkness, vowing to wait for High-Cirque in the depths of hell. The cost of arrogance is written in blood. Amidst a landscape of endless corpses, Wam reveals the grim truth. The Four-Nation Alliance triggered this apocalypse by torching a demon zone. As they discuss the abandonment of Sarajevo Fortress and their desperate march toward Dandal Castle, the nightmare catches up to Thima's sudden, violent monster ambush strikes. The ambush strikes with terrifying speed as a horde of goblin riders charges forward. Realizing the advance squad has likely been overrun, Wam and Sora 6 step up to the front, ready to face the onslaught. Time to clear the path. With cold determination, Wam unleashes his devastating power, shouting Ignis Fatuus. As a wave of fire consumes the charging goblin riders in an instant, the vanguard is turned into a living hell. While Wam's flames incinerate the front line in a chorus of agony, the remaining goblin riders prove to be dangerously fast. Moritz and his comrade are forced into a frantic struggle, fighting tooth and nail to stop the monsters from breaking through their defenses. The battle is frantic. Moritz slices through the monsters with lethal precision, but the sheer number of riders is staggering. Just as he clears one foe, another lunges from a blind spot, leaving him barely a moment to react to the incoming strike. A hellish inferno erupts. Unleashing the devastating Ignis Fatuus, Wam incinerates the goblin riders in a blinding flash of heat, leaping through the chaos with a cold determination to finish the last of them. A decisive strike to end the fray. Wam cuts through the beast with cold efficiency, but as the creature falls, he is left puzzled. This wasn't a goblin rider at all, just a lone wolf. One last strike to end the chaos, but as the enemy falls, Wom freezes in realization the final creature he cut down was nothing more than a riderless wolf. The bloodbath ends, but a chilling realization sinks in. As Wom stands amidst the carnage, he can't shake the feeling that these weren't ordinary monsters. Only 12 goblins, yet they fought with a level of training and coordination that defies logic. Even as his comrades call out to him, Wom remains lost in thought, struggling to reconcile the horror of this world with the strange efficiency of his enemy. A grim report arrives. A blonde officer informs Wom that a squad escorting Maillard refugees was completely annihilated up the road, linking the disciplined goblins Wom just fought to a larger, more sinister horde. While the officer finds the small number of attackers unusually strange, he leaves Wom with a final request. Keep a close eye on the prisoners. The dust settles, but the vigilance remains. After coordinating the security of the perimeter, Wom reassures his comrades that the ambushers have been dealt with. Amidst the lingering tension, a rare moment of levity emerges as Moritz teases him, leaving Wom to sigh in regret over his lack of training in mounted combat. A chilling discovery. As Wom surveys the carnage, he realizes that not only the refugees but the goblin riders themselves have been slaughtered. If the riders weren't the killers, then what kind of monster is truly stalking these woods? A predator far more vicious than goblins has left its mark. Examining the scene, Wom notes massive claw and bite marks, confirming that something immense and hungry slaughtered everyone here. While his men are shaken and wish to offer prayers for the dead, Wom remains chillingly pragmatic. Talk to him. The corpses are nothing more than obstacles blocking the road. With a cold indifference that disturbs his own soldiers, he tosses the bodies aside, prioritizing efficiency over humanity. The nightmare finally reveals itself. Just as Wom finishes analyzing the carnage, the colossal predator lunges from the shadows, clutching a fallen soldier in its grasp. Blindsided and shaken, Wom can only stare in disbelief at the monstrosity towering over him. A nightmare unleashed. Wom barely dodges the creature's crushing blow, struggling against a strength that defies reason. Deep in the heart of the forest, the horror only escalates as Moritz screams a warning this is no random encounter, but a deadly ambush. A nightmare unleashed in the forest. Wom barely has time to brace himself as the massive predator strikes with overwhelming force. Moritz is horrified to realize they aren't facing a mere beast, but a rampaging wyvern, a terrifying member of the dragonkin. No room for error. As the wyvern unleashes its chaotic fury, the battlefield becomes a nightmare of unpredictable strikes. Moritz screams for them to keep moving, knowing that a single second of hesitation will lead to a gruesome end, while Wom fights to stay one step ahead of the beast's crushing jaws. Death strikes in a heartbeat. As Mai is brutally devoured by the wyvern's blinding speed, Moritz can only scream in horror at the carnage, but Wom refuses to remain a prey. Realizing his eyes alone cannot track the beast, he unleashes the searing power of Ignis Fatuus, daring the monster to face him head-on. Pure, unadulterated rage. With a single explosive strike of Ignis Fatuus, Wom tears through the air and slams into the wyvern, unleashing a torrent of destructive power that rocks the very ground beneath them. The battle intensifies as Wom realizes his fire isn't enough. Despite the power of Ignis Fatuus, the wyvern's scales prove too resilient and he cannot unleash full firepower for fear of engulfing his own allies. With no other choice, Wom pushes his physical limits using body overdrive, closing the distance to deliver a crushing, heavy strike. A desperate gamble turns into a nightmare. Wom delivers his heavy strike, but the wyvern's scales are like iron, sending a numbing shock through his arm. In that split second of vulnerability, the beast snaps its jaws shut, snatching him up in a terrifying counterattack. A desperate gamble with everything's got. Wom unleashes the full power of Ignis Fatuus, a blast of heat capable of melting through steel. But as the flames subside, the horrifying truth sinks in. The wyvern's scales are nearly impervious, leaving his strongest attack as nothing more than a superficial burn. A desperate situation. With his maximum firepower spent and his strength drained, Wom realizes the wyvern has locked onto him as its primary target. Exhausted and out of options, he's left wondering how he can possibly survive this onslaught. No room for error. Pushed to his absolute limit, Wom barely evades the beast's crushing blows, his body screaming in exhaustion. With his strongest attacks having failed, he's now fighting for his life. Desperately praying for any opening, no matter how small, as the wyvern lunges for the kill once more. A battle of the soul. As he watches Captain Wom's desperate struggle, a soldier is consumed by a crushing weight of self-hatred. He remembers Mai, a good man who supported him when he was at his lowest, and the horrifying truth that he felt relieved when Mai died in his place. Now haunted by that shame, he is driven by a desperate need to finally prove his own worth. Driven by a crushing sense of inadequacy, the soldier looks at Wom's struggle and finds a spark of desperate resolve. He can no longer endure the rot inside his own soul. With a guttural scream, he throws himself forward, unleashing a reckless shoulder bash in a final, desperate attempt to prove his worth. A desperate gamble pays off. The soldier's reckless assault catches the wyvern off guard, leaving the beast momentarily stunned. With the monster reeling, the soldier screams for Captain Walm to seize the moment and strike while the opening lasts. A desperate gamble pays off. With the wyvern momentarily frozen in shock, the traumatized soldier screams for Walm to take the shot. Recalling the lessons of his training on how to channel magic through his blade, Walm prepares to unleash a devastating attack to end the fight. One shot, one chance. With the beast momentarily stunned, Walm leaps through the air, gritting his teeth against the exhaustion. As he drives his blade forward, the inscription on his sword echoes the brutal reality of his world. If you want peace, prepare for war. The moment of truth arrives. With a devastating strike, Walm drives his blade deep into the wyvern's throat, silencing the beast once and for all. As the monster collapses, a haunting memory surfaces. This victory is more than just survival. It is the redemption for something he failed to achieve long ago. A strike that shatters the strongest armor, with a roar of raw intensity. Walm plunges his blade deep into the wyvern's hide, searing the beast from within. How do you like it? Well cooked! No escape for the monster. Driven by a fierce determination to protect his comrades, Walm unleashes a searing torrent of heat, screaming for the beast to burn to ashes. As the wyvern is incinerated from within, the crushing pressure of the battle finally breaks, leaving only the charred remains of a fallen foe. The end comes in a flash of searing heat. With a single cold command, Walm unleashes the full force of his power, obliterating the wyvern in a violent explosion of fire and reducing the monster to nothing but ash. A terrifying display of power. As Walm walks away from the carnage, Ayan is left haunted, realizing that the strength required to slay such a beast is the same power wielded by the Krace soldiers and Tuhazen knights, very monsters who burned her world to ashes and stole her freedom. The battle is over, but a new crisis begins. Walm collapses from the sheer strain of his devastating attack, sending the surrounding soldiers into a panic as they rush to stabilize him. Ayan, still reeling from the overwhelming power she just witnessed, can only look on in stunned silence as they fight to keep him alive, a victory bought with blood. Walm lies broken and breathless, his armor shredded from the sheer intensity of the clash. Ayan can only stare in shock, wondering why he would push himself to such a terrifying limit. As the soldiers frantically work to strip his armor and save his life, the sheer madness of his determination leaves everyone shaken, a level of madness that defies death. As the soldiers carry Walm's broken body, they are left in awe and horror, wondering how any man could push himself to such a terrifying extent. In a desperate bid to save him, they turn to the only help available: prisoner healers. Despite their capped status, the healers agree to step in, with one preparing full internal examination. The battle against the Wyvern Z. The battle against the Wyvern is over, but the fight for Walm's survival has just begun. A broken body, but a will that refuses to fade. As the healers list his devastating injury, shattered ribs and a broken humor, Walm barely manages to open his eyes, pleading for help. Despite the severity of his wounds, Ayan remains composed, recalling that this isn't the first time she's had to pull him back from the brink of death. The scars of the past run deeper than any physical wound. As he recovers, Walm is pulled back into a nightmare memory of a camp obliterated by magic, where he woke up in agony surrounded by the corpses of his comrades. Consumed by a sudden wave of remorse, he apologizes to Ayan and Maya for treating them as mere tools, and for the innocent lives he's burned in this endless conflict, only to be reminded that in this cruel world, such horrors are simply the nature of war. A sudden realization. Ayan had seen Walm as a ruthless, indifferent monster of the battlefield, a battle maniac devoid of emotion. But hearing his confession, she sees the truth. He is human, just like her, bleeding and broken. Despite her shock, she tries to convince herself she knew it all along, even as the harsh reality of their unhygienic surroundings threatens his recovery. A fragile peace settles in as Walm begins to recover, but the air remains thick with tension. While soldiers clamor for Ayan's attention, and Maya warns against trusting Walm's sudden vulnerability, Ayan looks upon the broken man with a heavy heart. She realizes that beneath the mask of a monster, he pushed himself to the absolute brink of death just to ensure their survival, a heart burdened by guilt. Ayan realizes that Walm isn't a heartless monster, but a man who carries the heavy weight of every life has taken. As he weakly tries to brush off his own confession, she understands the tragic truth. This agonizing struggle with right and wrong is exactly what war does to a human soul. Focus on the task at hand. The male healer urges Ayan to push aside her swirling thoughts and concentrate on Walm's recovery, reminding her that the treatment is paramount. But as he works, he catches a glimpse of something within Walm that makes him pause in realization. A shift in focus to a place of old power and forgotten borders. This is Castle Danderg, an ancient fortress standing guard along the former Maillard border. Welcome to Castle Danderg. Beyond the imposing stone walls, the fortress is a hive of activity as laborers haul heavy supplies to sustain the garrison. Amidst the chaos, Walm looks out over the crowded courtyard, a silent observer of the grim reality of military life. As he is handed a simple bowl of a fortress of stone cannot stop a tide of monsters. As Walm moves through the halls of Castle Danderg, he is unsettled by the overwhelming number of refugees seeking shelter. With the great rampage consuming the Milliard region and hundreds of thousands of monsters closing in, he finds the refugees' reliance on the castle's sturdy walls naive. To Walm, this isn't a sanctuary, it's a trap for those who believe they are finally safe. A meeting of steel and scars. Guard Captain Walm reports his mission's completion at K2, the commander of Castle Danderg. While the general acknowledges the rumors of Walm's solo victory over a rampaging wyvern, Walm remains humble, attributing the kill to the support of his allies. A humble report leads to a manic reaction. Walm is left completely bewildered as Aki-2 erupts into hysterical laughter. The general is floored by Walm's simple description of clinging to and burning a wyvern, viewing such a raw method as unprecedented. With a sinister smile, Sigismund concludes that sending Gerald Berger was the right move. The laughter fades as the cold reality of war returns. Ki-2 quickly shifts gears, assigning Walm's squad to guard the healing mages, but makes it clear that Walm himself is needed on the front lines where they are critically shorthanded. Despite the heavy burden, Walm is told to rest and work alongside Ayin to recover his strength. He accepts the order with a polite thank you, but internally, the weight of the endless conflict continues to press down on him. A soldier's intuition rarely misses the mark. Walm voices his concern to Aki-2, fearing that the sheer number of refugees within the castle walls will only hinder their combat operations. Sigismund acknowledges the tragedy, noting that many simply refuse to abandon their homeland. With a final reminder to focus on the task at hand, Walm takes his leave, a lingering doubt. As Walm walks away, he can't shake the feeling that housing thousands of refugees is a strategic disaster, draining supplies and diverting troops. He realizes that if the monster horde arrives, the crowded castle will descend into pure chaos. Then a chilling thought strikes him. Is the gathering of these people actually the goal? He begins to wonder if the refugees are being used as mere bait to lure the monsters directly to the fortress. The grim reality of the refugee crisis is laid bare. In the crowded halls of the castle, Maya is pushed to her absolute limit, having healed a staggering 100 people, far exceeding the standard of excellence. But magic alone cannot solve everything with medicine, and even boiled water running dry. Walm realizes that the sheer scale of the suffering is becoming an impossible burden to bear, a small act of kindness in a cruel world. Seeing the desperate need for supplies, Walm steps in to help, revealing a secondary water attribute he once considered useless in battle. As he provides hot water for the wounded, he notices Maya's extreme fatigue, urging the exhausted healer to stop before she collapses from mana depletion. A desperate plea in a room full of suffering. Maya begs Walm to let her keep going. And though he knows she is pushing herself to the brink, he realizes that stopping her would mean physically dragging her out of the room. He gives her a stern warning: the moment she feels dizzy or nauseous, she must rest. Yet, even while providing this small comfort, Walm's soldier instincts never shut. He can't help but wonder if this chaotic environment is the perfect cover for an assassination. A surprising side of the soldier emerges. After showing off his water attribute, Walm offers to brew some fruit tea, revealing he scavenged the fruit from discarded high-ranking officers' luggage during the retreat from Sarajevo Fortress. His unexpected resourcefulness leaves the other soldier quite amused. A feast fit for a monster. Just as Walm was thinking of something simple like fruit tea, he is faced with a culinary nightmare. Staring down a whole roasted orc head, he is left completely speechless and disgusted by the brutal reality of their rations. A dinner from hell turns into a shocking discovery. While Walm is completely repulsed by the roasted orc head, he's stunned to find a man who treats the grotesque meal like a nostalgic snack. The man reveals he spent his days eating poisonous insects and monsters just to grind his poison resistance skill. This eccentric behavior sparks a sudden realization in Walm. This man is Sugimoto Ayane, a fellow countryman from his original world. A taste of nostalgia for some, a nightmare for others. Sugimoto Ayane fondly recalls her days of dissecting and eating monsters alongside other heroes like Yudo, Makoto, and Johanna. For Walm, however, the mere thought is enough to leave him utterly traumatized. A culinary nightmare arrives on a plate. With a cheerful smile, a blond man serves Walm the most delicious parts of an orc, the tongue and the nose. While the server is oblivious to the horror, Walm is paralyzed by disgust, desperately trying to stall for time as the grotesque meat is pushed toward his mouth. For Walm, this isn't a meal, it's a psychological battle. A taste he never wanted, but can't deny against all his instincts. Walm finally takes a bite of the orc parts. To his absolute shock, The grotesque meal is actually delicious, boasting a salty flavor and a perfect tender texture. He's horrified to find himself enjoying it, all while the others watch his reaction in dead silence. A brief moment of culinary surprise, and then back to reality. The meal ends with a stern reminder that the real work begins tomorrow, leaving Wom in a pensive mood. As the night passes, a new day dawns over the spires of the fortress. Morning at the fortress begins with the cold reality of war. Soldiers are sorted into labor and combat duties, while officers discuss the outer perimeter and the ongoing struggle of Ben's squad against goblin riders. Amidst the organized chaos, Wom watches silently as he is pointed toward the smoke of the field kitchen, a gut feeling that something is terribly wrong. Normally, you'd steer clear of a castle that smells this suspicious, yet a large, armed force has gathered here. Are they truly defending my yard from the Great Rampage, or are they merely live bait to lure monsters? Unable to shake his dread, Wom decides he can't just stand by. "I'll step out for a bit," he mutters, ignoring the confused calls of his comrades as he walks away to uncover the truth. A sudden stop. Driven by his gut feeling, Wom intercepts the armed force, halting them in their tracks. With a cold, piercing gaze, he questions their presence, wondering if these men are truly defenders or merely adventurers caught in a dangerous game. Desperation smells like hypocrisy. The blonde officer falls to his knees, begging Wom for help after fleeing the Great Rampage. But Wom is unmoved, coldly reminding the man of the Hyserk soldiers they slaughtered from behind, and mocking his shallow patriotism now that Maillard has completely lost. Faced with a sworn enemy who holds all the cards, the officer is left with one desperate question. What must he do to survive? Mercy is a luxury Wom can no longer afford. With a blade pressed against, taking the man's head might be a more efficient solution than listening to his lies. Even as the officer tries to assert his status as a knight, and his companions scream in absolute desperation, claiming they have no homeland left and are being hunted by the Great Rampage, Wom remains unmoved. To him, they are merely treacherous remnants of a defeated nation, and he has no intention of playing the safe, a desperate gamble for survival. As the tension peaks, the Maillardian officer and his companions, Rumi 4 and Mika 11, scramble for a way to settle the conflict. While Rumi 4 tries to sacrifice himself to save the others, the officer refuses to let his comrades perish, finally submitting to Wom's cold presence by offering his own head. A brutal lesson in survival. Rather than taking the officer's head, Wom delivers a crushing blow that leaves the man bloodied and broken on the ground. With a cold, murky gaze, he mocks the officer, deciding that this battered state is a far better look than death. A brutal lesson in humility. The officer is left shattered and bleeding on the dirt, his desperate offer of sacrifice met with nothing but cold violence. Without a second glance at the fallen man, Wom turns away and commands the remaining soldiers to line up, asserting his absolute and terrifying control over the group. Mercy comes with a terrifying price. Wom welcomes the broken remnants of Maillard to Dandurg Castle, but his greeting is a cold ultimatum. Any betrayal will be met with the cutting of their tendons and a plunge from the castle walls. Completely crushed and stripped of their pride, the soldiers can only bow in desperation, thanking him for the mere chance to survive. The calm was only a temporary illusion. 5 days after Wom and the others arrived at Dandurg Castle, the alarm bells scream a terrifying warning. The Great Rampage has finally caught up, and its main force is now crashing against the gates. Panic erupts as soldiers scramble to their posts, desperate to hold the line against the oncoming storm. A horizon turned black with death. The nightmare has finally arrived. The main horde of the Great Rampage is upon them. The tension on the walls is suffocating as the archers hold their breath, waiting for the perfect moment. Then the command rips through the air. Now, a rain of arrows descends upon the monstrous tide, marking the desperate start of the battle for Dandurg Castle. The order is given, and a storm of arrows screams through the sky. The first volley strikes with brutal force, shredding through the ranks of the Great Rampage and turning the onslaught into a bloodbath. A sudden shock ripples through the defenders. Just as the soldiers of Dandurg Castle believe their arrows are holding the line, they realize the Great Rampage isn't just advancing. The monsters are throwing themselves against the fortifications, desperately trying to bore through the walls. The walls are failing. Panic spreads among the defenders as they realize they lack the mages needed to hold the line. Despite the officers' frantic screams for volley fire, the horror escalates. Massive trolls have arrived, clawing their way up the fortifications to breach the castle, a drop in the ocean. Despite having slain hundreds of monsters and climbing the ranks through countless missions, the experienced adventurer finds their strength meaningless. Against the endless tide of the Great Rampage, they realize with horror that they simply cannot stop the onslaught. The nightmare only intensifies. Panic spreads across the walls as the soldiers realize their arrows are running dry against the relentless grinning swarm. But the horror doesn't stop there. Just as they struggle to hold the line, a winged predator dives from the sky, launching a sudden, lethal ambush from above. A flash of steel cuts through the chaos. Just as the aerial monsters dive bomb the panicked defenders, Johanna springs into action. Using body acceleration, she moves with blinding speed, skewering a wyvern midair before it can cause further carnage. A whirlwind of steel and desperation. Johanna's blinding speed clears the air, but as she looks across the ramparts, the grim reality hits her. The defenders are falling like flies. Amidst her horror, a frantic scream pierces the air. Get down now or be burned alive. A blinding flash of power erupts. Refusing to let her comrades perish, Johanna unleashes the devastating Ignis Fatuus, leaving the surrounding soldiers in absolute awe of her overwhelming strength. A legendary figure emerges from the smoke. The defenders are breathless, realizing that the man who unleashed the devastating Ignis Fatuus is none other than Guardian Chief Walm. But the moment of relief is shattered as they notice a gruesome sight. The monsters are piling their own dead to create a foothold, preparing to swarm the walls once again. A daring plunge into chaos. Just as the defenders begin to breathe, Walm shocks them all by leaping straight off the castle walls. While Johanna and the soldiers watch in disbelief, the Guardian Chief descends into the maw of the horde, meeting the grotesque monsters with a cold, unsettling calm. A plunge into chaos. Walm dives headfirst into the waiting maws of the monster horde, reflecting that fighting beasts is at least straightforward compared to the horrors of war. A storm of fire and blood. Landing right in the heart of the swarm, Walm unleashes the devastating Ignis Fatuus, turning the battlefield into a slaughterhouse. From the walls, the defenders can only watch in shock as they witness the terrifying great rampage of their Guardian Chief. Pure devastation. As the flames of the great rampage recede, the defenders can only stare in disbelief at the carnage left behind. With a single, effortless leap, Walm returns to the walls, his expression as cold and empty as the wasteland he just created. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. As the dust settles, Walm reflects on the growing strength of his Ignis Fatuus, calculating that he could push himself for one more strike. The defenders, once paralyzed by fear, now look upon their Guardian Chief with awe, believing that with him on the walls, they might actually survive. However, the effort has left Walm exhausted, leaving him to lean against the stone and catch his breath. A terrifying display of power. As the smoke clears, the defenders can only stare in disbelief at the devastation wrought by the Ignis Fatuus. For these soldiers, the sheer scale of the attack is overwhelming, leaving them with one haunting realization. Thank goodness this monster is on their side. A moment of hard-earned peace. Exhausted from the slaughter, Walm finally closes his eyes, hoping for a brief respite. But in this world, rest is a luxury. He is abruptly awakened by a soldier with an urgent message. Brigadier General Sigismund demands his presence immediately. Duty calls even in the depths of exhaustion. Walm arrives to meet Aki 2, delivering a grim report from the front lines. Despite repelling the monster hordes, the soldiers are pushed to their limits, running low on ammunition and relying solely on the mages to survive. Facing the bleak reality, Sigismund asks the one question that matters. How much longer can they hold? The clock is ticking. Walm warns that the monsters are evolving, using tunnels and battering rams in a desperate attempt to breach the walls. He predicts they can only hold for another 2 or 3 days before the battle turns into a bloody close-quarters slaughter. While Sigismund agrees with the grim assessment, he reminds Walm that their communication line to the homeland remains intact, their last remaining lifeline. A bombshell revelation. Sigismund reveals that they will abandon Castle Dandurg while they still have a sliver of leeway, planning to halt the monster advance in the former Konoha region instead. Stunned by the news, Walm asks if the withdrawal is being kept secret to prevent panic among the troops, a grim necessity that Sigismund confirms. The cost of survival is often paid in blood. Sigismund reveals that the retreat will begin at dawn the day after tomorrow. But the plan is ruthless. Regular soldiers will be replaced by prisoners and volunteers to hold the walls. Horrified, Walm asks about the refugees and mired soldiers left behind, only to receive a chilling answer: anyone who cannot move in time will be left to barricade themselves and pray they survive the coming rampage. A cold reality sets in. Horrified by the plan to simply wait for the monsters to pass, Walm argues that they should be fighting to kill, but Sigismund remains unmoved, pointing to the staggering losses they've already suffered. To the general, fighting to the last man isn't heroism, it's a futile sacrifice. The price of survival is often paid in blood, and not always the blood of the soldiers. Sigismund lays out his cold logic. Lure the monsters with attractive bait to whittle down their forces and buy time for the army's escape. Walm initially understands the necessity of sacrifice until the horrifying truth sinks in. The bait consists of the innocent Myard refugees, and there is no plan to save them. As Walm grits his teeth in silent fury, Sigismund cuts through his hesitation with a chilling reminder of his duty. Citing his reputation for obedience, the general leaves no room for debate. This is no longer a discussion, but a direct order. A cold trade-off for survival. To save their own, they are willing to cast others into a slaughterhouse. Sigismund makes it clear that the operation is strictly confidential, trusting in Wam's loyalty as a soldier. He assigns Wam the critical task of maintaining the communication lines, dangling a sliver of hope that if all goes well, a few of the mired refugees might actually survive. A crushing weight of duty. Wam bows his head, submitting to the ruthless military hierarchy. With a hollow voice, he accepts the order, knowing the terrible price the refugees will pay for the army's survival. As the towers of Castle Danderg loom overhead, the weight of the secret is suffocating. As Wam walks past the huddled, desperate refugees, he sees them not as survivors but as ghosts already. In just 2 days, these innocent people will be abandoned to a boiling hell of slaughter, and he is the one tasked with ensuring the retreat goes smoothly. The horror of his own compliance stabs at his soul. A sudden stir among the troops catches Wam's attention. As he listens to the soldiers' excited chatter, his mind immediately jumps to the darkest possibility. Could the secret operation to abandon the refugees have already leaked? A sudden turn of events sparks hope in the camp. The soldiers are in shock as they realize the monsters have completely pulled back from the castle, and the ranks erupt in cheers, believing they've witnessed a miracle victory. But while others celebrate, Wam stands frozen to him. This sudden disappearance doesn't feel like a win, it feels like something far more sinister. A miracle victory? Think again. As the soldiers cheer, a horrifying realization strikes the mountain on the horizon is moving. But a colossal burning monster that dwarfs everything in its path, the celebration instantly turns into pure terror as they realize they aren't safe there, just facing something or far worse. The nightmare has only just begun. What they thought was a mountain is actually a living god of destruction. The Flame Emperor Dragon, one of the 5 great dragons, a ruler of the ecosystem unseen for 150 years, has awakened, and it's heading straight for them. A nightmare made flesh. The soldiers on the wall are paralyzed by the sheer scale of the Flame Emperor Dragon. Their voices cracking in desperation as they call for retreat and contact with headquarters. They realize with horror that their ballistas are nothing more than toys against such a titan. Amidst the escalating panic, Wam can only stare in frozen shock, his heart hammering in his chest as the reality of their doom sinks in.